On that thing right now.
All right, welcome to the Ojai Unified School District Board meeting. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. We'd like to welcome everyone who's with us here this evening, as well as those who are joining us on TV or the internet. And we have a lot to do tonight. So we will begin with item number 2, the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Great.
I'll second.
Fantastic. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You're just going to move to do it's going to work that one later. Let's note that you're going to be doing.
Oh, right. I also want to make just one bookkeeping note. Agenda item 7.5.1, we're going to move up to be before 7.4.2. It doesn't matter that much, but there's some logic reasons for it, so we'll get into more detail when we get there. Are there any other emergency modifications or additions to the agenda? No? Then minutes from the January 31st and February 3rd meeting.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Wonderful. All in favor? Aye. And now, the reason for coming here tonight, our student representative report, Zoe Jordan.
Hi everybody. So at Nordhoff, our most recent fundraiser was Pennies for Patients. It was in February and it was a homeroom competition. Second period classes competed and they brought in spare change and we raised about $730 and all the proceeds went to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Last week or 2 weeks ago, WASC came to our school and they're the accreditation people that stands for Western Association of Schools and Colleges. We led tours and they kind of like checked out our school and it was a positive review, I think. Testing and senior days are coming up. So what that is during the week of April 20th to 25th, we will be testing in Nordhoff, and that's when we have our senior days, when seniors get to have like a pancake breakfast, and they get to do a career fair, and we have a panoramic picture for the yearbook, and Battle of the Seniors, and all that fun stuff. Spring Spirit Weekend Rally is coming up. It's April 27th to May 1st, and it's going to end in our rally. The emphasis of this rally is the art programs, which is something that's kind of cool because we usually don't focus on that. It's usually more of a sports thing, but focusing on arts and performing arts this time. And then the last little bit is that prom is coming up. It's on Saturday, May 2nd at Limonera Ranch in Santa Paula. The theme is Moonlight in the Orchards. And so over the next couple weeks we're going to be making the final decisions for that, and profits from prom usually go towards grad night and graduation ceremony expenses.
Thanks. It was fun to see the video that Nordhoff made for the last visit.
That was fun to make.
So that was terrific.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah,
questions?
career fair. Do you know I think that maybe there's community members who might be interested in.
Yeah, Rotary Club puts it together,
Right.
and they kind of like pull different careers, and you get to choose as a senior. You get to choose like 4 different professions that you get to check out. I think it's in the gym at Nordhoff actually.
The tables. Yeah, tables for each. A table for each of the genres.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, anything else? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay and enjoy
I usually
All
do
that our
my
board
projects
meetings-
due to
Having said that, no, she actually does that.
I usually do today.
That's cool. Well, you're welcome to go and do your homework.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah.
Or soccer, or whatever. All right, thanks a lot. Item number 5, public comments. William Wyrick. We have, and if anyone else wants to fill out a form, they're available.
I have another meeting to go to at 6. We have an impactful building appeals board meeting tonight, so I thought I'd just relay questions from fellow city officials, colleagues on the council, as well as members of commissions and boards. I think part of that's my role as a liaison, to just relay questions that might come up and distill them in, and so I'm going to just go through that really quickly.
Right.
2 themes. Number 1, I've actually had several people approach me referencing the meeting that was, I believe, the January 31st meeting on the retreat or planning session, and the discussion of the need for a master plan. And commenting on, we're talking a lot of issues on the agenda here having to do with the oversight committee, the selling bonds, looking at developer fees, etc., without any sort of particular mention been of what the framework is going to be for what some people at least perceive as being a commitment to engage in a master plan. So I thought I would just relay that question for future reference in terms of, at least in some of the people's minds that I speak to, is sort of a necessary condition for moving forward on a number of other things which have been agendized. And I'm just relaying an opinion. I'm not trying to plead. I'm not trying to, scold or lecture or anything. I'm just trying to relay concerns. Okay. And the second point is that I'm somewhat fascinated by the resolution on engaging a contractor for the developer fee assessment, and some of the things you're being asked to as a board to agree to by saying yes to that resolution language. For example, read a few things here. One part of that, the resolution states as a conclusion, the construction or reconstruction of school facilities is necessary to mitigate student overcrowding, which exists or is projected to exist in the district for the following reasons. Another reason being additional students projected from new development may exceed the capacity of existing school facilities, although the district is fully utilizing all existing school facilities to the extent deemed educationally feasible. And another part of that resolution you're being asked to agree to, that would be your words as board members, is that the district has no or limited revenue sources available for funding the construction or reconstruction of school facilities attributable to new development. I just find that fascinating in that, on the one hand, the part of the agenda is talking about looking at how we approach addressing the overcapacity problem, where you're also being asked to agree to a resolution which states that there is overcrowding right now. And then on top of that is the issue of, if we have a problem with getting school pupils in the school system, and the community has addressed its support for reconstructing and putting in new facilities, that's the support the voters voted for. Why, on the other hand, would we want to make housing more expensive, which would tend to inhibit bringing new students into the school system, because those tend to be people that are more affected by rising rents and residential costs. So I just wanted to throw that out for thoughtful process. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. We will move to item 6.1, and Jane and Kevin have been on the Oversight Committee and would love to hear your comments or thoughts about the
Would you like to
agenda
speak?
or not.
We were so pleased with the number of applicants that were received and the quality of the applicants. We actually at one point thought about just taking everyone who had applied, because they were so qualified and so helpful and so concerned for the district, and that was really exciting to us. But we kind of came to the conclusion that 16 people would possibly make it difficult for the committee to actually get things done and make recommendations. So we decided to, cut that in half. We're recommending to the board as a whole 9 of those applicants. And we request that anyone who is not being recommended, please come back again, because we will need your services, and we would love to have those applicants come back again, as the current applicants that we're recommending will rotate out because of term limits.
So again, yeah, we're talking about the Citizens Oversight Committee for the spending of the Measure J money. And that's a requirement, and that was something that was committed to by the district. And I know that as Hank went around and talked about the measure, and anyone who was talking about the measure was well aware that we would create this committee of citizens to help oversee the spending of the money and make sure that it's being spent for the things that are appropriate. And I just want to add from what Jane said, there was, notwithstanding the fact that we ended up with 16 great applicants, there definitely was a period of time when we were wondering if we would have any applicants. So, I think that was another one of our aspects of our reasoning was, yes, we had 16 people, but, we're not all that sure if our community has a whole lot more in the arsenal, so to speak. So these are 2-year terms, and we didn't want to use up the whole committee of people willing to serve in one fell swoop. So we ended up with 9, and I guess we should identify
Mention
them.
who they are.
And some of them are here, but they are Nicole Body, and we'll be asking the board to approve this committee. Phil Carruthers, Dennis Court, Bob Daddy, Josh Griffin, Dave Intner, Mike Labor, Jeff Palmer, and Sarah Turner. And I think a few of them are here. Those who are here, could you stand up? And those who aren't on the committee, sit down. No, just kidding. Just kidding. So thank you again.
Great. Yeah, we really appreciate your service, and hopefully we'll be able to hear from you in the future and have an ongoing communication. So
I think it's also worth talking about just logistically. I think the current idea, and this was suggested by Hank, was that we would have at some point in the near future a joint meeting with the committee and really hammer out its charge and really kind of hammer out how often they're going to meet. That may not be a static data point. It may change over time. I think we realize that early on there may not be the need for as many meetings as there may be along the way, but we're certainly mindful of wanting to be collaborative, and now that we have a committee, assuming that the committee is approved, we certainly want them to be in the room to determine what the scope of their work is.
And that was discussed quite a bit at this sort of subcommittee level, and with each applicant, what their expectations were of this committee, what our hopes are for that committee. But the scope of that committee and what it's going to do is minimally talked about in the measure. So it's up to us to decide how much more on top of that we hope that they could help us accomplish.
I'm hoping to get like a refurb of my bathroom. Were we on tape?
Kevin used to be a comedian.
So with that, I mean, we just...
Yeah, so the board is asked to approve the subcommittee recommendations and appoint the 9 members. If we have a motion to approve.
I would move to approve.
I'm happy to second.
Wonderful. All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful.
Thane, if I could just say a word.
Yes.
I want to acknowledge the work of Kevin and Jane in this. I know that they spent a lot of time on this, and I think this yielded a really nice result. I especially want to thank all of the people who applied, having absolutely no idea what we were going to require of you. But now we have you, and thank you.
So wonderful. Yeah, well said. And yeah, again, thanks to Kevin and Jane for their work on that subcommittee. Item 6.2 is next, the Valley Oak Charter, petition for charter renewal. Do you have some comments, Hank? We reviewed this in some detail at our last meeting.
Just a few. We did, in fact, talk about this charter proposal for renewal, 5 years. At the last board meeting, and Laura's back. Thank you, Laura, for all your work at the last meeting at that podium. I hope, as I said to the board, that we covered a very high percentage of the questions board members had at that time, but if there are others, certainly that's what tonight is about, or today into tonight is about. So my recommendation, again, as I shared with the board, is that we approve this renewal petition as it's presented, with one adjustment and one caveat. That the adjustment is found on page 30, the last item, in fact, under charter size. And it says, in the petition, it says enrollment at Valley Oak Charter may not exceed 100 students at any given time. The present limit is 75, and I'm recommending that that limit be retained. I shared very directly with Laura and Craig at a meeting a couple of days ago. The reason for that has absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the program. In fact, I think the quality is strong. It just didn't seem logical to be increasing the size of a charter school by essentially 33% at a time when the district has experienced a 40% drop in enrollment, and we continue to have projected enrollment decline. So I think in terms of proportion and equity and fairness, that what was achieved over the last number of years at a limit of 75 should be retained rather than increasing the size of the charter by, as I said, 25 on a base of 75. In addition to that, I would recommend that the board approve a motion that would make all of this formal, in fact, have the charter petition enacted subject to the signature by Danny or me, whoever signs it, and Laura on behalf of the charter, on or before March 31st of an MOU that would detail the relationship between the two organizations. And as I said, if Laura, you mentioned to me in that meeting, if there's something that would prevent you from finishing all the work you have to do by March 31st, then I certainly would entertain a small extension of that into mid-April. But let's shoot for March 31st and understand that the petition would be granted once the MOU is signed.
Absolutely.
Okay? So that's my thought on where we are on the charter. Congratulations on 2002, 13 years, right? 13 years of being in place. There are a lot of new ventures that don't last 13 months.
So after 7 years, you're fairly safe.
Yeah, yeah. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's a 7 year.
Is that the 7-year itch period?
Yeah.
Right, so you're done.
Like that.
You're done after that.
Business was my background before education, so that was the rule of business.
Easy sailing. Thanks again to Craig. Not surprisingly, you had a lot to do with the writing of this. I know that he's very involved with writing at the charter school. Yeah. And so those are my thoughts.
Wonderful. Thank you. For this item, we're required to have a public hearing.
Of course.
So if we can have a motion to open a public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Now we can talk.
Okay, thank you. Can I just take a moment to introduce the people?
That would be
To
great.
support the charter. I'm going to start all the way at the back, and it's Christine Jiggers, who is our office manager, also my friend of 20 years, so going even farther back in the charter. Next to her is her granddaughter, Rhea, who is one of our shining stars at the school. We just love her so much. Nancy Welter, who you all know, who taught at Matilla for years, has joined our staff and has taken on the very daunting task of dealing with our new high school program. Thank you, Nancy, for surviving your first year. Angela Schramm, who is our new resource coordinator, who has also taken on a huge task to help us design and implement our new special education program. Across the hall there is Lori Zatkowski, who I'm sure you all know from her years of service to OI Unified. She's our programming coordinator. She has, she not only teaches classes because that's her real love, but we force her to do jobs like programming, figuring out how to make people do their tests and all kinds of fun stuff. Next to her is Bryce Pace, who's been with our organization for years and years. Very, very gifted educator. He does a number of things at our school with our students, in addition to developing a huge tennis program that isn't going to give you any trouble at all, Jane, but it's still a pretty good one. I'm very proud of him. And then if we move across, we have Craig Walker, who you all know, who is our, actually now, We've given him the title of Assistant Director. I think we should call him El Jefe. He does so many things at our school and is such a huge support to us all, in addition to actually working with our programming coordinator to develop our open time programming, which is our Wednesday kind of socialization, open time, field trip activities for our students. Next to him is Teresa Stepp, who is an extremely involved parent at our school, serves on our board of directors, has done so many things I can't even begin to list what they all are. But she actually started there because she has a student in our program, and we kind of sucked her in. Next to her is Barbara Amador. Barbara actually taught with Valley Hope years ago when we were still at our old site. She now is a parent at our school. Her son Hunter is one of the 3 children who just raced outside to play because why wouldn't they? And she also does a lot of work on our school as far as working with curriculum, and she serves on our board of directors as well. Kara Lakes is next to her. Kara is our primary educator. She kind of takes care of our little guys. Her 2 daughters are outside, and I need to point out, Taryn was with our program for years, so was McKenna. McKenna is going to be 13 tomorrow. She would want you to know that. I'm sorry she isn't here, so I can't embarrass her. McKenna will be 13 tomorrow. We all need to celebrate that. And then we come up to our front row. We have Nathan Gibbons, who's one of our students, been with our program a great long time. His mom, Beth, thanks for being here. And I wanted to end with Rebecca, because Rebecca, who is not a student at our school, needs to be embarrassed right now, because we just found out that Rebecca is one of the Miss Oakview princesses.
Yeah, I saw that.
You're all awesome people, and I'm so fortunate to have you in our community. Okay, now I'm ready to answer questions.
Thanks a lot. Well, we covered a lot of ground last time, but why don't we go around if there are any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. I just want to echo what Hank said in terms of, I think I do support the enrollment limitation, but for those reasons and not for any question of the quality, I was completely impressed. So
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I agree. I had most of my questions answered, all my questions answered last time.
Great.
I would just provide you an opportunity. Do you have any comments about that issue as between 75 and 100?
Well, let me just start by saying that I totally understand Hank's stance. I have the same concerns for the district. I taught for the district at Topa and Matilah, and even at that time the district was declining. I understand that that is a challenge, and it's probably going to remain a challenge for the future. That's just the reality of our little Shangri-La here. The families who are having lots of kids probably can't afford to move here. That's the reality of it. I do understand it, and I totally support it and agree with it. But as I shared with Hank, from our perspective, to me, 100 is the perfect number for a school. In my years of education, I've found that that's really the number that gives you enough students in each grade level to really have an effective program. And from our perspective, it would allow us to have enough students to really separate our supervising teachers, to have another teacher on staff who could then, Nancy would do her high school, we'd have a group that did middle school, we'd have a group that did low primary and a group that did mid-primary, which would allow our teachers to be more effective in their supervising. But again, I do understand it, and when Hank presented us with the numbers, what can you say? That's the reality of the situation. As we discussed, we were kind of brainstorming creative ways to potentially allow Valley Oak to get a little bit larger without having a negative impact on district. And I will continue to explore those things. And don't be surprised if you see me back up here in a year or two going, well, how about if we do this? Because from the charter's perspective, that's our kind of our ideal number. But again, I do understand where the district is coming from, and I have no problem with supporting that.
And are you currently at 75?
We are at 75 with a waiting list. We are. Now, as far as the MOU is concerned, Danny and I have been, well, first of all, I think everybody here knows this. Danny is leaving us, which I think is really wrong, and I don't think we should allow her to do that. But since nobody has appointed me, the queen of the universe, we're going to have to let her go here pretty soon. She has been an integral part of our program. She's served on our board for years. In fact, when Danny and I first started working, Danny wasn't Danny, Danny was Laura. She didn't even have the job she has now. So we go back a long ways, and she and I have had our moments, but we have worked very well together, and I've appreciated everything she's done for me personally and for the charter, and we will miss you so much. They really will. The only thing that makes me feel better is knowing that she's going to be in Encinitas, which is an incredibly beautiful place. As somebody who was born and raised in San Diego, I know you're going to love it there. But we have been working, the two of us, back and forth for probably the better part of a year and a half.
Almost 2 years.
2 years.
I'm kind of embarrassed
trying
to say
to
that.
basically take our simple little charter. You have to remember, when the charter was first approved by this body, who was a different body back then, it was like 18 pages. It was this little teeny tiny thing, and we just kind of threw everything in there, or the people who put it together. And Danny and I have been working over the course of the years to try to, kind of spiff it up a little bit and make it more adequate for this day and age. So that's what the MOU is about. We're trying to, Danny's been working on changing the language to make it more current, to make it more explanatory of what's involved in it. So it's not like there's a whole lot of substantial changes in it. It's just a matter of kind of bringing us up to the 21st century. So although I cannot commit 100% to the 31st, just because next week I'm at conference all week in Sacramento, then we come back for a week, and then we're off for 2 weeks. So even though I'll be working, Danny, you know I will be, I don't want to make a commitment to that, but I am trying my best to get that to you. And I'm sure that we can reach an equitable solution shortly thereafter, if not by the 31st. That's pretty much it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the MOU was drafted by this insurance company that we both belong to, and we work with them to tailor it because it was actually drafted for regular charters, day charters, and we tailored it down to independent city charter and just made it applicable for all the compliance to the state standards, federal standards that we're required to do, and we're just putting it in writing. That's all it is, making sure it's very clear, taking it out of the charter, making sure it's very clear in the MOU what are ours and theirs responsibility for compliance purposes mainly, things like that. And then a little appendices for district services that they buy back that we already do. So it's 95% complete. I'm just on the appendices.
No, I know I said it, but I really felt after the fact that you had answered our questions.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad.
We're certainly very supportive of what you're doing.
We appreciate that. The charter started, 12 years ago as a teeny tiny little group of parents and 35 kids, I think they had when they started. And there's a huge need out there in our community for people, for a program that supports people who make this choice, who decide this is what they want. They want to retain a real active role in their children's education. And of course, in the state of California, they can do that anytime they want to. They can file a little form and present it at the school of my house. And sometimes that works really well, but not all the time. There are things about homeschooling that are challenging. And one of those things is simply having some structure, some support, some resources, and a group, a consistent social group for these kids. Because that's one of the huge things that children learn in our school system. How to get along with other kids, how to negotiate the things that kids need to negotiate, how to take direction from another adult without bursting into tears. So those things we give children practice in, and I think we serve a really vital role for our community, and we really appreciate your continued support.
And you mentioned you might want to come back. We love your visits, so you're always
anytime
welcome.
you want to. If you just need somebody to come and fill up your time, Thane,
I appreciate it, and you bring such a lovely group of people. It's really nice to have you all here, and we appreciate it a lot. We can close the public hearing then, if there's nothing else, if we have a motion to close.
I'll move.
And actually, can we go ahead and just make a
And
motion to approve it with the retaining the 75 people limit, or?
Sure, we need to close the meeting and then, yeah, so if we can have a second to close the hearing. Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then, do you want to move?
Sure, I'll
Yeah.
make a motion to approve the renewal for the charter with the condition of retaining the student body at 75.
And
the signing of the
And the signing, right.
Right.
Don't forget that.
And the second?
I'll second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Have a wonderful evening.
So, Laura, the political chant is 4 more years? You get one more. Fine, go one more. You get one more.
All right. Well, don't feel like you need to wait 5 years to come back.
You do reports. Anytime you ask for one, okay?
Thanks a lot. All right, moving to 7.1.1. Our Valley Oak team is moving out, and we're glad you were here. I do want to comment briefly before turning this over to Hank for more explanatory notes, but the next two resolutions are with regard to having to release workers because we don't currently have the money to pay for them. In my mind, this is one of the most ridiculous systems you could possibly ever have. No business, no organization works this way except for schools, where we know that we're going to have more money when we get to the fall. We know that we're going to hire all, if not most of the people back, but we have to notify them that possibly we won't. Which I think, it's just emotionally traumatic to get a letter saying you may not be able to work next year, even if you know you will. And I just think it's terrible, but here we are, and because of the law, we have to do it. So tell us the details.
Number one, I agree with you. The fact is, there's a little light in that end of the tunnel. And so the tunnel starts mid-March, and it sort of gets midpoint about mid-May, and then it comes to the end of the tunnel in the early summer or so. But just to put a little set of facts around Thane's very appropriate comments, fact is, in the last 2 years, even though we've been very budget challenged because of retirements and moves of people here and there, we've been able to bring back, now remember, this is just, we're talking about teachers now. Because we're going to be doing this again for classified staff in not too long in the future, 6 weeks or so. Just for teachers, though, we've been able to bring back every or almost every teacher who wanted to come back in the last 2 years. Now, that doesn't mean our staff has increased, because it really hasn't. The full-time equivalents are about the same as they were a couple of years ago, down a little bit, predominantly for enrollment decline, but not because we failed to exert the kind of efforts that we needed to bring people back. So as I look at these lists, board members have the names and they know a lot of the people, of course. I want to underscore what Thane said. There are two different lists here. 7.1.1 are people who work for us with what I'll just call non-normal general fund processes. They might be funded by donations or grants or things like that. And you can't ever know exactly how many dollars you're going to be getting from those sources in March. So we have to take all those temporary employees, that's what they're called, hourly people, part-time people, who fall under those general categories, and assign to them this letter that Thane was talking about. But once we sort everything out and we get our hourly people in order for the 2015-16 year, my strong belief is that a great percentage, up to all, but perhaps not all, but very great percentage of those people will be able to come back when we have all the assignments worked out. The second group, 7.1.2, are people who are under sort of what I would call our general fund categories. And, there are some individuals who are full-time this year, some individuals who are part-time, but they are individuals who sit within the regular classroom as the teacher, and they're not there on an hourly basis. The number of full-time positions, or the number of full-time equivalent positions that are included in the materials the board received far exceed the numerical decrease that we'll have next year. I would say at this juncture, the most likely change of staffing in regular classroom teaching, that regular is defined as not the hourly kinds of assignments, regular classroom teaching, probably will be only about one full-time equivalent at the elementary level, K through 6. The likelihood is none at Matilaha because the enrollment looks pretty stable. And at the high school, probably around one or so. Remember, and at the junior high and high school, particularly at the high school, you can be very definitive about this section, meaning this class of this subject, or that class of the subject, so you can have a 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, whereas at the elementary level, unfortunately, we don't have that kind of flexibility. It tends to be either 1 or 0. Right? It's either a classroom teacher or not. Came up with a half-time teacher this year, but essentially, it's a full-time assignment, even if it's shared by a couple of people. So, my belief is when all things are known by all of our staff and people make retirement decisions later, they can do it pretty much any time. We've been very flexible, and that could, for example, at the elementary level, eliminate a whole group of people who were hired at the same time and had to be on the list together. And we'll be talking about, a process that might incentivize a person to do that when we get to the next agenda item. So that's really what I had to say. Martha's here, representing that group, of course, and I want to thank Martha again for all the work between her and Jody, and among Jody and Danny and me and some others to make sure that we reduce this number as much as possible, because we've been committed to that over the last number of years.
I think we can take these items together rather than doing them separately. So if we have motion to approve resolutions 14-15-13 and resolutions 14-15-14.
Reluctantly, and with the understanding that this is precautionary only right now, I would move to pass.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving to 7.1.3, and this is the, if you want to talk about that.
I sure will. So, again, congratulations to Martha for her persistence. She's been in Danny's office, my office, both of our offices, and working with her own colleagues to forward this concept, an agreement between the district and the OFT. We call it the Retirement Incentive Program.
I like the initials.
I know. We've all decided that we can.
I have my reservations.
we wish we could come up with a better acronym, but anyway, you can figure that out at home. Retirement Incentive Program. Anyhow, to be sure that we're being forthright, the concept is that a teacher who meets two criteria, at least 55 years old, at least 15 years in the district, and there's some other language in there that you would expect from a lawyer, who retired June 30th, 2015, and is eligible to be retired under the retirement system, we assume that. But those two criteria, 55 or older, on or before June 30th, 15 years or more, in the district as a unit member, teacher, could retire at that point in time. A decision would have to be made by April 30th and confirmed by June 1st, and there would be two payments, one of $10,000 in September of 2015, one of $10,000 in September of 2016, so that is in fact the incentive for the person to think about that additional compensation, that additional monetary impact on that person's life, who might otherwise not retire at this point in time. It's obviously an individual decision, and as I said to the board, you never know who will access it, who happens to qualify. We know that about 21 or so people qualify according to those criteria. Not all will take it, and you can't know who will. The downside, of course, is that you always have the reluctant impact of losing some great people who spend a good part of their life here. The positive side is for that person, they move on to another part of his or her life. And the good news is that, for example, for those teachers who are on that cusp of the one reduction in elementary staffing, all of them would be able to come back, number one, and we would have the opportunity to go out and see people who are on the very early end of their career to replace one or more of the individuals who would be retiring early. So I want to thank Martha again, thank Danny. They spent a lot of time together. I was very pleased to receive this. It's the right time, we think, for us to do this, and the financial impact to the district while it's impossible to know exactly, the chart and the costing out of the process indicates that there should be some net plus for the budget, some net plus, depending on who takes it. In general, the cost of having the newer teacher come in at a step on the schedule we identify, which I think is very reasonable. Not beginning step, but not step 10. We're looking at step 5 with the master's. Is that what we ended up? Master's degree step 5? Yeah, master's degree step 5. So the cost of that person compared to the person leaving, generally the person leaving, plus the $10,000, plus the additional health benefit cost. Okay? Put those together, and you end up with a bit of a net advantage to the district budget, which that is a good thing. Okay? And that's sort of the concept that we're forwarding tonight.
Great, so we've been asked to approve the memorandum of understanding and the agreement between the school district and OSD. Do we have a motion to approve a question?
Quick question,
Yeah, sure.
it just occurred to me. Hank, that last point you made about step 5, is that in here that we're?
No, it's just, it's
Okay.
No, that's what I'm calculating.
Got it.
When I'm calculating an estimate,
saw the
I have to
chart?
pick
Got it.
the replacement.
So
I pick an average.
So whatever the district does in terms of replacing a retired person who chooses this program, we're free to decide to hire two very cheap,
It could
very
be
early
somebody-
on.
It could be someone with no experience and they come in at step 1 with
Got
a
it.
BA rather than a master's, but I have to
I'd
pick
rather
a
be
point.
conservative since it's her last.
I appreciate it. I was just, as a lawyer
Like, you
myself,
get
I'm
a
like, did I
choice
miss
with
something?
that.
Well, no, it's actually the absolute midpoint between step 1 and the highest step. I would say 90 to 95% of the time, we would bring someone in not beyond step 9 or so. So if that person has 15 years, then the person would have to understand that's the highest we can go. So step 5 happens to be a midpoint between the two.
And I looked at the last 5 hires and kind of looked and said, where does it sit? And it sits right in line, so.
Great. Yeah, I just was wondering if it were in here, and clearly it's not.
No bearing.
Got it.
Just
So it came forward for basically those 2 reasons, knowing that we might lose 1 or 2 positions because of declining enrollment, and budget-wise, it fits to have some incentive.
Both are true. Both are true. And, I just felt that we're certainly coming out of our absolute lowest point. Right? And I think the time is now to try to address some of those people who are on the last quartile, if you will, right, of their teaching career, and to give them the opportunity to make this personal judgment.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
I think it's a good idea.
Great. Motions to approve?
I'll move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Can you retro it back 6 years to when I retired?
I don't think that's in here.
Yeah. But I think that would take a separate item. That's right. And the next item is with respect to negotiation of the union agreements, and while we have, I think, an exceptional relationship and the ability to speak informally and positively, we're required to do this in a very formal way. So, Hank, do you want to?
I will. Again, these two obviously relate to each other. The only issue that's before us is actually in a very strict format. It's really just the opening of negotiations. There's no positioning going on here. We'll have our opportunity to sit down and talk, although I don't think it's going to take very long to get to the main point of what we want to discuss. So really, this is just the opening of the opportunity to sit down together, which we do every year. If we didn't even have these documents, of course we have to have them formally, we do it anyway. But this is a good time for me to say what I've told other superintendents, and they're just sort of in awe of this, that we have 2 absolutely non sequitur things going on with our union. On the one hand, unions. On the one hand, both the certificate and classified unions have, and you've heard me say this numerous times, have had to absorb, as have all the other staff, administration, the most furlough days in the county by far over the last 6 years, and yet in that period of time, I'll just speak for the teachers because that's what's on the table right now, there has been well over a 95% yes vote from them to absorb those furlough days, okay? Because they understood the alternative, which was that we would have to cut more staff because they believed, and they were believed correctly, we just didn't have the funds to do both. That is, to retain staff and also not have furlough days. We had to make some judgment. And so here we are now, and the two documents that you see, really bring that issue to the fore, and that is, if we are fortunate enough, after the May revise, and we do our recalculations, and Laura does all of her spade work, and we find out that we have some dollars that we can use beyond the return of the 3 instructional days for next year. That's number one. Okay? And make sure that our bottom line is in order, and we have 2.25% reserve. If we have additional money, then we can sit down and talk about options, and the 3 options, among others, are the ones you know about. One is the return of one or both of the last 2 furlough days that are staff development days. The second is a change in the compensation schedule. In this case, that's being presented by the teachers as something to discuss, and the third is addressing class size. Those are the 3 personnel-related costs that fit into what we might do if we have additional money come May, June, July, etc. So tonight, we're looking at their proposal and our proposal to get to the table and talk about that issue.
Great, and so this is another item where we need to have a public hearing, so we'll need a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll motion.
And second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So are there any comments or questions about this item?
So there's no, just for those at home, we're not discussing anything except the fact that we agreed to sit down and talk.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. This requirement is based on a Sunshine Act where you have to publicly disclose, both the union and the district, what you're going to be talking about in those sessions in negotiations. And for example, it doesn't behoove either side, the union side or the district, to add things. We just come back and add it, publicly disclose it at the next board meeting. And you guys will have your time at closed sessions in various points to talk about it in closed session and make your recommendations to the district and come forward. So.
And just to shed that sunshine, what this says is that according to the Ojai Federation of Teachers, the sole issue that they would like to negotiate is the salary schedule, their salaries.
They want salaries as priority. Correct.
I'm wondering, is this a potentially a full successor, or is this a limited reopener and we've just chosen to?
In essence, it's a limited reopener because everything else, we think the contract works great. Okay, so it's strictly very in a narrow, very format. What could we do with additional funds? All of it.
Mike, would you mind sharing the lingo of HR people?
I'm just curious, that we've only identified a couple of articles to open up and to negotiate, and I was wondering if that was because this was the whole contract is potentially at issue, and we've chosen to surgically negotiate specific areas, which is a wise way to do it, or if this was a limited reopener for purposes only of negotiating.
It's really the former. It could be the former.
But we also just did the entire contract last year.
We just
every 3 years.
We just did the 3-year contract.
Even that was.
Salaries and benefits are always annual, and then they can do an additional language. We also have a side MOU that if we want to go into the whole contract, we can. We open that one if we chose to. So.
Okay.
It's a living contract.
We'll get you a copy.
So salaries, as you say, that according to the contract will be negotiated every year. That's never locked in stone.
Correct. And that's in Article 1 of the agreement.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
If there aren't any other comments, we'll need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. And then we're asked to accept the letter of intent and proposal from the Ojai Federation of Teachers.
I'll move to accept.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Great,
Do
unanimously
we need to
done.
do 1.5 as well?
So we do it separately, it's a separate public hearing.
Yes. So in this case, we need a motion to open the public hearing.
So we didn't do them together?
We did not do that.
Okay, so I'll move to open the public hearing.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any comments? Motion to close the public hearing?
So moved, so moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And to accept the letter of intent? Yes.
I just want to, again, for purposes of this organization in front of us here and people on TV, our letter of intent is actually a little more specific than, or has more items in it than the teachers.
Right.
So we actually generally say that we're interested in talking about wages and other terms, and then we have some specifics in there about class size maximums. We'd like to continue the suspension of the maximum stipends and some other issues. I mean, it's available to the public, but I think it's worth at least commenting that there is a little difference there.
Sure. And the important one is the last one. That's what I was referring to.
The last one is the work days, so we're looking
Right.
at the work furlough program. Article 6 is the teaching conditions, of which we currently are on a 1-year side agreement to suspend them, and we've done that each year for 3 or 4 years, and we're asking to do it again. This is to suspend the stipends that are payments to the teachers for having caseloads over their maximum class size.
And the last point that Hank's referring to is the furlough days.
Right.
So we'd like to maintain the 2 furlough days.
We'd like to maintain the opportunity
Correct.
to have 1 or 2 furlough days. As I said, it's that, really, hopefully we get a chance to talk about what we might do with X number of tens of thousands of dollars to address 1 or 2 furlough days, to address an increase in the salary schedule, and as I shared, then there's the third piece, which is class size, which is more expensive pretty much to do something important, but you can still do it. I mean, it's really interesting how this works out, that about the cost of about 1 teacher equals about the cost of 1 furlough day, which equals about the cost of 0.5% on the salary scale. Okay. I mean, it's just almost within a couple of $1,000s equal among those 3. And so it's a pretty interesting conversation.
I think what's also worth noting before we take the final vote is often in a negotiation, one side is looking to do less and one side is looking to get more. In the case of both of these, exactly. We all want more. We both want to make the teachers' lives better.
Absolutely.
So that's just a question of how much we can do and when. So great. Do we have a motion to accept the letter of intent and proposal?
I'll move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Moving on to curriculum and instruction. 7.3.1, math.
And tonight is Matilda night, huh? Yes. We have math and American Studies. So I think the guy who's walking up to the podium knows something about math.
Just a little bit.
Javier, for those again watching on TV, keep referring to that. Javier Ramirez, assistant principal at Matilda for almost a decade, was a math teacher at Nordhoff, graduated from Nordhoff and Matilda, and was an engineer before he came back to be a teacher at Nordhoff. And he's really been the point person for the junior high component of the elementary, junior high, and high school study of how to look hard at what Common Core mathematics means. At the junior high, Magda, department chair, and others, but Magda has been there even before Javier was there, right, for a long time. So Magda at the junior high, and Renee Nakama at the high school, and Marilyn Smith and principals and teachers at the elementary schools have really been working hard on this whole transition, some of which is easier than others. I don't mean to say yours is easy, but compared to the elementary schools, at least you have something you can pick up and hold, right? Okay. Yep. And that's what we're talking about tonight, is this pick up and hold these two books, which are available for people here tonight to look at. The board, of course, had an opportunity. So you're going to be talking with us about moving forward now, right, to formalize these textbooks as the piece of the curriculum that our 7th and 8th graders will access, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And if you recall back in November when we presented our single plan, I brought the books and I passed them around because at that point we were just looking at it. It was just a pilot. We were lucky enough that we were able to work with the publisher to provide us with a pilot program. And now I'm here to really ask for the opportunity for the board to give us the option to actually go ahead and approve this for the adoption. The paper which I filled lists the reasons why we think it's a strong curriculum. Obviously, with the new change in Common Core, we looked and looked and looked. When I say we, it's me, Magda, myself, went through different book fairs and tried to find the curriculum that would match with the demand of the new Common Core, and also the demand of the new assessment, the Smarter Balance assessment. So we felt that this book really is a good fit for what Common Core is asking us to do. And we also feel that it's a very strong fit with the kinds of questions that the kids should expect with the Smarter Balance assessment. So if you had an opportunity to look at the book, you will see that it looks very different than your traditional book. And that's the point, right? We're moving away from the traditional, the procedural. This is very different, okay? This takes the investigative approach into mathematics. We talked about Common Core, that one of the big requirements in Common Core is for students to be able to make connections within different math concepts, okay? So if you look at a traditional textbook, you open it up and it's broken down per section. You have the quadratic formula in one section, you have factoring in another section, and very rarely do those two connect in a traditional approach. But if you look at this approach, when they are actually investigating the problems and doing the math, there's a lot of questions that are asked. There's a lot of reading in this book, if you notice. And the investigative approach used in this textbook, it really lends itself to the kinds of critical thinking that Common Core and Smarter Balance require our students to do. So hopefully you guys had an opportunity to look at it, open it, go through it, and maybe take a couple of quizzes that are in here and see how well you guys did.
We all took several quizzes.
Yeah, because I'm here to quiz you on it. I don't know if it's part of the agenda, but a quiz.
Well, luckily, you probably wouldn't be able to find the exact one that we're at now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's very difficult.
So we're basically here to obviously ask for the board to support us in this decision, and Magda and Margarita are here also to answer any questions. Don't ask me, ask them. But if you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to ask, and we'll do our best to answer them.
I do have one
please.
that just popped up because of what you were saying. So I actually went yesterday and sat in both those classrooms, 7th grade and 8th grade and advanced 8th grade, and I didn't realize, or maybe my question is, these, let's say there's an orange section and there's a purple section and the green section, are those actually each orange related to each other and each purple related, or they're just a way to get through?
No, there are 8 separate units, and within each unit, the structure is you have 5 investigations. So every first investigation is orange, okay? And because they're independently numbered from each other, I can't just tell the kids to open to page 25, because every unit starts all over again. So it's easier to tell them when we're starting a new unit, if we're on unit 5, okay, open to the 5th orange section. And then we'll have a number 1 and a number 2 and a number 3. So that's part of the structure of that book.
Okay, so then the comment you made about in the old way, things weren't really related, and in this format, they're related. How is that? I mean, is that a question? How are they related?
If you look at each investigation within each section, the student is asked, that's what they're called investigations, because the student is actually asked to investigate the problem. So when the students are investigating the problem, they usually have to answer a series of questions. And each question is not discrete just to one concept, if that makes any sense. So when they finish the investigation, they would have developed, or they would have grabbed from different concepts to finish the investigation. It's not just one little thing. We're going to talk about the quadratic formula. Here's the equation, and here are 50 problems. Go ahead and try it. And maybe, does that?
Right. So there's a development of a concept that may have started even in the 6th grade book. So, you know, in 7th grade, when we're looking at linear patterns, it goes back to, remember in 6th grade when we did the patterns and variables, and you developed the concept of how a variable changes. Now we're going to use that same concept to graph a line. And while we're graphing a line, it goes back to, and in the previous, when we're talking about ratios and proportions, all of the graphs for ratios and proportions will look like a straight line that goes through 0. So it builds on the concept of variable, it pulls from proportions, and then rates and proportions, then it brings in the number sense of percents, all of the changes of fractions to percents to decimals, and also looks at the algebraic concept of, if you have an x, you can find a y, if you have a y, you can find an x, and then it leads into solving equations. So it's always, remember how you did this? We developed to find this and review this. And
Marilyn, are we spiraling? Is that an example of spiraling?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And one of the strengths that I found in this book, which I really, really like, is that every investigation is a real life scenario. It's a real life problem. It's not some obscure mathematical, concrete thinking, abstract thinking. But it relates it to real life situations.
The Pit and the Pendulum, was that from these books? I saw somewhere a Common Core example of a math problem involving the pit and the pendulum and having to estimate whether...
I think that's one of the programs in the IMP.
Yeah, that's the IMP in the high school, yeah.
I assume, well, to begin with, every school district is faced with the exact same problem facing us. Do you find that there's a consensus out there that these books are the ones being chosen, and to the extent not, what other books are available?
Well, right now, so far, there are 3 districts in the county who have actually officially adopted this book. And there are 4 who are piloting it right now. Wow. So it makes us feel good, right? And Magda and I are part of something called the Ventura County Math Network, Leadership Network. And it started because of the Common Core, and it's just a support group made up of administrators and teachers from all the county. It's a support group.
Where do I sign up?
It is.
Is there one for students and parents?
So anyway, we had the opportunity to talk to other administrators and other professionals in the field, and we feel very, very comfortable of the comments that we have heard about this program.
One other, so that's great. So you feel like this is the best available, and you have asked for 364 textbooks. I know in our previous conversations we talked about issues with available textbooks, and I think Shelley Griffin had the idea of making some available at the libraries and things like that. Can you speak to, is this one book for each kid? Will they be bringing these home? Will they be leaving them at the school?
Yeah,
Are there electronic versions?
We do have electronic versions. We do, definitely. And with the request of having that many books, that will give us enough for kids to have one at home and for the teachers to have a classroom set in the classroom. So it's basically the same thing that we currently have with our math program, which is we're trying to avoid kids carrying the book, right? Because they're heavy and we're having to lock them to. So with that amount of money that we're asking, it would cover that. Absolutely. Good.
Because right now, since there's not one to take home, they're
using the digital version. Actually, we're using the online version.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't think that's...
That I created.
Yeah.
But you don't want to continue that way?
Well,
because I noticed when, especially in the classrooms, it's not, as far as a book as a parent, I used to be able to, when my child said, I didn't get it, that I could read the chapter and go, okay, here's what you need to do. But this isn't really like that, because there's no...
No, it's different. It's very different.
So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what's the advantage to actually having one at home versus just having the online version?
Well, first of all, we have to provide our kids with a textbook. And the online version that we're doing, we were given permission by the publisher to do it for a limited amount of time.
And you're also copyright
We
to
made some-
to
yes,
make packets.
absolutely,
Remember,
make
not
packets,
every
yeah.
child has
Yeah.
online access.
Right.
And we do that sufficiency of instructional materials in August before school, as school starts, saying that we have enough materials, textbooks to take home and to have in a classroom. It's
Yeah, we have
required.
found that actually the little
It's a
packets
state
that we
requirement.
made, the copies at the beginning of the year, that has minimized tremendously, right? Since we started the online program. Most of them are accessing the curriculum through the website, and it's linked from our Matilla High website. So they go to the Matilla High website. There's a link there. They click, and the chapter pops up, color and everything. It's really, really nice. So a lot of them are. That's what they're doing. And obviously we have the sets in the classroom, and we have extra ones in case parents. And we have had a handful of parents and kids who said, we'd like to have a book to take home, and we provide them with them. But most of them are going through the website.
That said, going forward, they'll have one at home.
Yes.
And you want to and we need to provide them with a textbook.
Yes, exactly.
I have more of a comment. I am really glad we have experienced teachers, because we're going into this unknown world. I mean, the concepts are the same, right? And the math principles are the same. But the way we learn and the way we teach and the way we go through this process seems really foreign to, I think, to a lot of people. So I'm very hopeful, but I would love to get reports back from teachers, from everyone, to just kind of let us know, because I think you have a sense of what the kids are actually learning compared to what they used to learn. And is it matching? Are they, at the end of a year, at the end of their experience at Matilla, are students as prepared as they used to be to move forward? I mean, it's not something we can answer today because we're kind of just starting this, but I would love to hear that in the future. Maybe they're more prepared. Maybe it's better, but we don't know, right? So it'd be great to keep our eye on what's going on.
Progress, yeah. Well, I can just share very quickly that from a parent's perspective, I want to take my hat off. I have to wear hats sometimes, right? I want to take all those hats off. And from a parent perspective, Jasmine, my daughter, she's a 7th grader, going through this program. And she's been struggling a little bit with this program, but it's good. The struggling part is good. I'm happy that she's struggling. I'm a nice parent. I'm happy that she's struggling. I'm happy that she's reading the book. I'm happy that she's asking me questions. I'm happy that she's learning more than math through this book. I mean, some of the problems that are there. The other day, she was doing something with selling and buying cars. Just remember that. She came out to me and said, "Is that really how cars are bought and sold?" And she started asking me all these questions about the dealership. And I said, "Yeah, that's exactly how they are." So in every investigation, that's how it is. And she always takes something out besides math. She takes something out that actually is tangible to reality.
No, I think that's great. And Jasmine's really fortunate to have a dad who can understand the book. But I think Jane's point is right on. With a lot of parents, not being able to help their kids, I think there's a certain amount of feeling powerless and helpless. And so like I said, I'm really hopeful that this is fantastic going forward. I just think we're all a little scared.
Yeah. No, when I was talking to Javier yesterday, one of the things that I was impressed about, and this book seemed to, which might help the sort of parent issue, is I was surprised that one of the topics was, how many tiles to tile the swimming pool, right, which we've all seen before. But that sort of real world thing, and the students were talking about you know, how many tiles this worker's going to bring to tile this pool, but there was 3 different ways for them to get to the right answer, which I've never seen before. I had always, you know, the child is, this is the way you get to that problem. And it was really fascinating for me. And I think for parents, they need to know that they can encourage their child to find a way. Like, there's not just one way, find a way. And that's going to get more students interested in, especially in mathematics, to be able to say, well, I can be creative and still get a mathematical answer. And I can guess and not be afraid of it being wrong, because there could be more, well, there's not more than one answer, but there's more than one way to get there.
And it eliminates the ability for the kids to say, I'll never use this in my life, which is what kids have been saying for generations. So
Jane, was there a question in there about how many extra tiles the guy has to bring when he doesn't get it right the first time? Because that's usually what happens when you hire a contractor, right? Whoops, wait a minute, I got to the end of the line, that doesn't fit.
Well, actually, it was interesting because somebody said, well, why wouldn't you just send a worker out there and have them count it and measure it?
Oh, there you go.
Right? And Magda was saying, you know, can you, as a business owner, afford that half a day when you could just have a mathematical formula that would give you the answer, and you could order the tiles without paying someone to go out there and measure.
Exactly.
Which is the way of the real world, yeah. So I think I wanted to say a comment in reference to
Please,
what you were saying is, as a teacher, you know, the shift pleases me immensely, because even though it has been a struggle to finally get to kids to that point of, you know, yeah, you have to think, you have to dig in a little deeper. It's so much easier to give an example and they can mimic me, you know, 20 times, you know. That shift of the doing by watching example to that you really have to think about this and come up with different ways is really encouraging, because I think it does better prepare them to what they will find. You know, we're not going to go to a job and say, well, this is what you're going to do, you know, 20 times, but, you know, you will be given a problem that you're going to have to figure out. And I think that they will have way more skills, way more strategies to sit down and figure out, not just in math, but in anything, that you organize yourself, that there is a structure to your thinking, that's what math is. Math is problem solving, you know, and it's not really what some parents were kind of really, you know, at first, why aren't you teaching my kid to do this and this and this? I said, I am, but that's not just what math is. Math is way more beyond that. So when you, unfortunately, you can't share your skills in math, which is just that, now you're going to have to sit at the table and learn some math along with your child, you know. I'm thinking everybody should learn from the process. So I'm really encouraged, and there's nothing greater than for me to give the opportunity to the kids to come up, you know, like when we're sitting there in class, and my notes for the lesson of the day, it's about allowing for different equivalent expressions, you know, and I can sit there and think, oh my gosh, are they going to come up with them? But guess what? You give them the opportunity and you lead the discussion, and they do. They came up with all of them. I didn't give it to them, you know, and we call that was Tucker's method, and that was Mackenzie's method, and that was, you know, Jane's method, because that's who came up with them in the first place. So I think we've already come a long way, and we're only, you know, just beginning. So I think that as they get more used to the process earlier on, I think that's how much farther we'll be able to take them. So.
Yeah, and I would just like to add that the elementary schools, right, are looking at piloting the 6th grade book, version of this book, because this comes in a 6, 7, 8 program, middle school program. So they're looking into that, and this book is a good fit into what the high school is looking at adopting, which is the IMP. Okay, and
which is the IMP.
IMP, that's what it's called, the high school's program. That's what they're piloting this year, and it seems like they want to go ahead and recommend for adoption too. So it's a good fit for them. It's a good fitting into the high school, and just wanted to comfort you a little bit.
Thanks.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. At the beginning of the year, we talked about it, Bill and I, and discussed that, yeah, this is a big shift, it's a big change. So what are we going to do to support those kids? So usually our math help doesn't start until after like the first trimester. Well, this year we started it right like 4 weeks into the school year.
Maybe 2.
Maybe 2. Yeah, that's right. 2 weeks into the school year. So our math support every Tuesday and Thursday after school for 1 hour. We have Mr. Burns doing the 8th grade support, and we have Mr. Fredrickson doing the 7th grade support. In addition to that, we're offering our Saturday Math Academy. As a matter of fact, this Saturday, Mr. Burns does the Math Academy from 8:30 in the morning on Saturday to 12:30 noon, until, because we know they need the support. So that's a great opportunity for students who are struggling to get that extra assistance free of charge and free pizza on that Saturday Math Academy. So.
The one skill it does take away is cheating by looking in the back of the book.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah, for sure.
but no, I really appreciate your finding this resource and all the hard work that has gone into creating this program.
And one thing to point out is this $30,000 expenditure is coming out of the Common Core implementation funds,
Oh, great.
not the general fund.
Are there any other comments or questions?
I think this is a really interesting approach. I've heard a lot of issues and concerns, but I have to say, as somebody who sort of missed it the first and the second and the third time around, looking at this, I actually think I might have had a shot.
It's never too late. Take one of these home.
No.
Never pay too much for your car again, Michael.
No, I can't do that. But no, it was very interesting. So congratulations on the work.
Right. Do we have a motion to approve?
I would like to make a motion to approve these textbooks for purchase for next year.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. So let's go learn math.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot again. Now on to the American Studies, new course of study. And if I could just preface this a little bit by saying my youngest daughter, Sage, had a similar approach in her last year of high school that combined social studies and English, and loved it. So,
Well, thank you. That's all I need to say.
I'm excited about
My work is.
Well, thank you. Good evening. And before we go on, I just want to point out across the wall here, since this is Matilla on night, these masks were done in 7th grade social studies with Steve Gard and Andrea Vasquez. Andrea's right here. And they are really beautiful, and it's part of West African history in the 7th grade world history class. And if you haven't had a chance to take a look at those are all student-made. And the kids had to not only make them, but then they have a presentation along with it. So that is such wonderful project-based learning where kids really learn. And it was just a great thing. And the best day is when they pop the balloons from inside, all at one time. So it's a great thing. So thank you, Andrea, for that. Well, maybe 3 months ago, I was sitting in my office talking with Carrie Holden, one of our longtime social studies teachers, excellent teacher and department head for social studies. And we were talking about course of study. And we were talking about English and social studies. And we kind of got on to this idea of blending 8th grade English and 8th grade social studies. You probably know that I taught English from 7 to 12 for about 17 years, and I was the English side of that, not in Thane's daughter's class, but taught that class, that side of it. And it was the best thing I taught, I think, because I worked with the history teacher about once a week, and we coordinated curriculum so that when she was teaching the Revolutionary period, I was teaching the Declaration of Independence as literature, and I was teaching Ben Franklin's autobiography and Ben Franklin's speech at the Constitutional Convention. And when she was in the 1820s and 30s, I was teaching Poe and Romanticism, and I was teaching Walt Whitman, Oh Captain, My Captain, and when Lilacs Lasted Doriart Bloom, when Lincoln was killed. And so we were dovetailing constantly, and the kids got a much richer experience. I wasn't having to teach all of the history, which I loved, by the way, but I was able to focus on the literature and the writing and the grammar, and the history teacher brought the history. So we got excited, of course, because that's what teachers do. We get excited. And so we said, well, how about that? So we had a nice big joint meeting between the English department and the social department. We talked it all out. We said, we need to try this. Looked into it a little bit, found out that Santa Barbara's doing it, Ventura does it. I said, why don't we try this? So I'm going to get out of the way right now and ask these two fine ladies to come on up and talk about what they've been working on. Andrea Vasquez and Carrie Holden.
Hello. Well, of course, as a social studies teacher, I have to start with putting yourself in my shoes, which I ask my kids to do all the time. Put yourself in my shoes. All right, so imagine that you're me and you're designing a unit on, let's say, the explorers. And right now, I have to get to teach vocabulary, mapping skills, the rich content. I want to give the kids opportunities to do research projects. I want the kids to kind of have this history come alive. I want them to design a resume and do all of these other things and read, Columbus's diary and all of these amazing things that are out there. And then I go, oh, I have 10 days to do this. And it's just an impossible task. So then I think, I sat down and I started going, well, which of these do I want to leave out? Well, I don't want to leave out the vocabulary, I don't want to leave out the geography, I don't want to leave out the reading, I don't want to leave out the persuasive writing that I want to teach them at the end of the impact of the explorers had on the New World, both positive and negative. And so I'm in a quandary. What am I going to do?
So that's where the fun part starts, which is my job. Yay! So I get the opportunity to expand on what Carrie has been focusing on for the first week. She gets to introduce the topic, the who, what, when, where, the solid facts, and then I get the fun stuff. We get to read Columbus's diaries, and we get to talk about making a cover letter because we're hiring explorers to sail the 7 seas. And so there's not 7. But this is the part where we get to focus on the depth. We get to get the students to dive deeper into the curriculum and the subject matter instead of just sort of skimming the top and being able to try to retain those facts throughout the course. So we get to enrich it with readings, with diary entries, with different kinds of aspects of public speaking, interview skills, presentation skills, and of course technology, which right at the heart of Common Core, we are diving in headfirst to technology through uses of our...
We're total techies.
We really are.
They are.
We really are. We are trying to lead the school with through our Google Classroom and through Google Docs, and really having an opportunity to get the kids using the Chromebooks or our computer labs as well, and getting everything that they can get out of it, including research projects and creating the presentations themselves to be able to hopefully be doing what we're doing here someday, but with multimedia.
And I think one thing that I'm really excited about is, as a social studies teacher, my goal, one of them, is to have the kids really develop empathy for the people and to have a deep understanding of, what was it really like? And how better to have what was it really like than through readings, read the diaries, read the accounts, listen to, and the other goal I have is to teach perspective. And so put yourself in somebody else's shoes. How are the natives going to view the explorers? Okay, what impact did it have on them? Not just what happened there, but what impact did this have? And so really, right now, we can do bits and pieces of that, okay, and just kind of skim the surface. But if we had English supporting us, then the kids could get a much richer experience.
It fosters debate as well, to have those kind of conversations between the students, student-led discussions regarding, selecting Explorer, selecting different points of view. It fosters student-led discussion, and it fosters debate, which I think is very healthy, and it's one of our standards. So it really ends up providing more avenues for learning that way.
And I think another really positive benefit for students is now they have one assignment for 2 teachers. So rather than kind of doing a okay job but a whole bunch of stuff, they can really focus their energy And again, that whole depth instead of the breadth approach. And my course doesn't become just a survey course, you know, where we touch on different things. And social studies, it's so important, like math, you know, you have the building blocks. And I with the Common Core, I've sat down and I've analyzed, you know, it asks you, well, which can you leave out? Well, in history, you can't really leave out huge chunks because everything, you know, builds upon the last thing. And so, again, we would be really excited to have just try this class because the possibilities are so amazing, in my opinion. It's like my dream come true.
It's really exciting.
So are you guys looking to do this for all 8th graders or a section?
Well, right now we're just going to pilot as a section and then kind of reevaluate at the end of
So how
next
many
year.
relative to the total would this be? What is a section?
So it would be an elective class, like they will elect to be in this class, so it's probably 32, 35 kids, typical kind of English social studies class.
And they would have us,
So they'd have me, the idea is to have me first, where I could kind of lay the content and the foundation.
and I can expand
And
in
then
the next
she'll
period.
go and expand on the concepts that I've introduced in the next period. And both English and the social departments, when we talked about it, said, wow, because Mr. Topping, who teaches social studies and English, he says, well, I spend a lot of time in English giving kids the background to readings, and, you know, we're reading something about World War I or about the Dust Bowl, and I'm having to lay out this whole historical narrative in order for them to really be able to understand it. So here, you know, it's just, yeah.
So
it's a
Bill,
perfect fit.
numerically, you're talking about something in the low 30s out of a total a year group of close to 200.
Close to 200 kids in each grade level, and we would be talking about 32 to 34 kids who would travel from Cary to Andrea. And they would have, my goal would be to make them back to back, and also to give them a common prep period so that they have an opportunity to talk and to plan, and they can talk about how individual kids are doing. By the way, this goes back to our 6th grade committee, which was a great committee, and about Matilda someday going 6-8 when financially that's feasible. But this is a middle school concept, even in a junior high school. And so we want to try to middle school Matilda as much as we can with 7-8. And having this kind of connection in smaller groups with kids where the teachers know them more intently and going interdisciplinary is very much a middle school kind of a concept.
Will it be a scheduling nightmare?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we defer to Mr. Rosen.
We will.
You guys are techies. Work it out.
That's right. Exactly. We will make it work.
Which is kind of a funny story. I'm a nouveau techie. My family used to call me a techno-mutant until the last 5 years. I went to my first Google conference like a few years ago and just sold.
And she's now a trailblazer along with Andrea in the school of technology. Yeah, so the kids they'll be sharing documents electronically.
Which is just amazing.
Yeah. And then they're going to have, the Chromebooks will be, the curriculum will be embedded within the Chromebooks on a regular basis. It won't be let's bring them out and type today. It's going to be part of the research and the sharing and the debates and all of the various standards.
So is it going to be a lottery? Because it seems to me there's going to be a lot of kids who want to do that.
We are going to...
We've had that discussion.
We've had that discussion. We have, and we are going to purposefully limit numbers, and we are going to create a random sampling as neatly a bell curve as we can. It's not going to be a de facto gifted or advanced or anything else. It's going to be a general class. Everybody's going to be there, and we will say yes to some kids and have to say no to others. But it's an opportunity to try, work out bugs, decide what we think, and along about next January or so, February, we will reevaluate. We'll keep data along the way and have lots of conversations about how it's going, and decide if it goes well, what next? Do we expand through 8th grade? Do we go to 7th grade world history kind of a thing? We'll decide. But first, we want to make sure that we can do it and do it well before we consider generalizing it.
That was an interesting point, though, Jane. And that was a great question, because now and I don't know the answer to this. This is not a setup. You have advanced and then regular classes, right? Okay, across the 8th grade continuum that are discrete, as discrete as you can be, according to the strength of the academic background and performance of that student. So are you saying then that if you pick up on this random selection, theoretically you'd have about a 3-to-1 ratio, sort of regular to advanced, right? Something like that. So let's just say you have that. So this is actually, would this class then represent that? In other words, or are you going to have the opportunity for advanced students who would be advanced coming out of the 7th grade to get into this lottery or whatever you call it?
Students will still have the option of choosing if they are in, let's say a student is in 7A English, they can still opt to go into 8A. Or if they are in 7A, working really hard, doing really well, they can opt into 8A. We do not have a hard and fast track. We allow kids to choose and be challenged. So it's not you get in, you can't get out, or vice versa. Kids who would be in this class, there might be kids who would be very suitable for an 8A class. Very suitable. And if those kids want to be in, they can be in. One of the questions has been, well, if a student is in 8A, then they have a pretty good shot of being in the honors class in 9th grade at Nordoff. Will these kids have the same option? The answer is that is done through teacher recommendation. Kids meet standards. It's not the curriculum, strictly speaking, it's the standards. Okay? Andrea will be teaching the Common Core standards for English Language Arts. If those kids are exceeding standard and they are ready for the 9th grade honors class, Andrea will write a letter of recommendation to Nordoff, just like the 8A teacher will. And they're both teachers at Matilaha. They'll both be highly respected. And then those people will have to make a decision who's going to be and who's not going to be in the class. So a student could be in this class and then still be on that kind of a track, you might say, on through high school.
But just getting back to 8th grade, the point is that the class would not only be different in the sense that it brings English and social studies together, it's different in the sense that it's heterogeneous. Okay,
Which is what social studies classes are now.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, right.
So but not English.
But not English, right. So
it'll
from an English
more
standpoint, that'll be an interesting test also, won't it? To see how those students of some differing ability work together. Right?
I have 2 questions. One is, what is taught right now in 8 English? Is it basically the same kind of, it's Anne Frank and, right? As far as like what books and novels or stories, it pretty much ties in with.
It doesn't follow social studies very well.
No.
They read things that are very different than kind of our periods in history.
Okay. The Pearl, The Red Pony, several Steinbeck novels. We have Little Prince. We just adopted The Hunger Games as well. There are several you can Tom Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer.
Tom Sawyer.
There are several books that have been chosen to read. With the new standards, there is no right book to teach anymore. It's open. You can choose what you like as long as you're following the standards and addressing them.
Yes, Common Core does not say you shall read Scarlet Letter or Huck Finn, although I hope everybody reads those in high school. But it does say you shall meet these standards. And the question is, what curriculum do you choose to meet the standard? So that's the order. It's standards, then it's curriculum.
And then there's a very heavy nonfiction piece added to the Common Core standards that we're adopting, that have been adopted. And so what this does with our curriculum is actually facilitates it tremendously, because we'll be looking at our primary sources and real world diaries and experience those firsthand, and to be able to read more nonfiction pieces.
Biographies and speeches.
Yeah.
And
letters.
America's founding documents. All of those things are rich nonfiction informative text, which is really where Common Core is at the junior high and high school level. Not leaving behind important literary pieces as well, but knowing that the emphasis on the writing is going to be on the nonfiction. That's where the balance is going to fall, which is a challenge when you've been teaching something that you love and you have to let it go, or have to decide what do I cut and what do I not cut. in order to
But
meet
you
the
know, Hank, I
standards.
think what you were talking about this sort of bell or this different group of children, I'm very interested to see how that will affect sort of achievement. Because I think there's a lot of students who prefer a different way of learning, that something like this would be, just like the math, it was totally different for me, and I could see certain kids being engaged in ways they hadn't been in the past. And
And
this-
there's some parents/children who have aspired to be in the advanced group, and that's where they want to be, and that's where they're going to be, right? But
And
there are
that's
others.
why it's good. I think it's great that we're offering them choices.
I agree with that.
You know, so if you want your kids in the advanced English, great. We have that. We have a really, really strong English teacher, and it's an excellent program. All right. So again, I think it's important at the junior high to offer meet the needs of a whole wide range of people.
This conversation did raise another question for me. I love the idea, and the curriculum I saw in the literature I saw included sounded fantastic. But how do we make sure that the kids aren't reading that again and again and again every year? Is there coordination with Nordhoff and with the other teachers?
I can just say a couple things. You'll notice that, for example, Huck Finn is not on there, because that's really American literature. That's more of a higher level kind of a read. But you'll notice that Casco Amontillado be on here, or to build a fire. There are several pieces of literature here that kids would be fine for them to read in junior high school.
Well, and I did notice most of it is relatively short, so if they had to read it again, it wouldn't kill them.
Like of Mice and Men, they
Right.
will probably read it again in 9th grade. Well, the advanced students are reading it. We'll read it this year, I think they're reading it. Of Mice and Men, and they won't read it again as advanced students, but then the general level students will read it again in 9th grade.
So that's a challenge.
It's a possibility that they would get it again if they went from an honors class to a general education class.
Yeah.
But that book is, as you said, short. They're quite short. It's a novella, and there's so much deeper meaning to it that to go into it a second time just enriches the students' learning through something like that.
Right. It's just a shame that they can't read something else.
Right.
You know, because I was always struck by this as a parent that, there's a Library of Congress full of books, and we're reading the same one over and over again.
I just like to
We
suggest
understand
that with the advent of Common Core, one of the challenges that I think that the English departments at both schools, and Greg and I need to talk about is he and I have been talking, we've been really focused on 7-12 thinking. And I think the math is a perfect example of that, is connecting the Teleha and Nora. And I think one of the things that we can do is, now that we have implemented Common Core, let's talk literature lists. Let's make sure that we're not stepping on each other. Let's make sure that we're putting things in the right spot, because as we've said, the Common Core does not define a list that shall be taught at this level, this level, this level. And so we as professionals, we can sit down together and say, where does this really belong? And put them in the right places and talk about that. So that's a challenge, and I think it's one that I'm willing to meet with Greg and all the English teachers and just talk about it.
That would be great.
6th grade's begun the process as well. There's a teacher from Toba, I believe, who's begun the process, which I think is really beneficial. And so I've been communicating with us regularly, both in social studies and in English, with regards to what they want and what we want. And of course, she's deferring to us, which has been pretty great. We're lucky.
I do have a question. So if this model works, are there other collaborations or connections that you're thinking about, other subjects?
Other than, say, 7th grade social studies, English, something else?
Right. The social studies, English, I mean, there's a natural
That's a
connection
natural,
there. I mean,
yeah.
it seems really easy, but is there, because it's an intriguing approach, are there other collaborative connections that you foresee possible?
I have lots of different ideas, but some of them are funding based. This one really doesn't cost the district anything.
Right.
We're using the same staffing. I could see, well, I'm not sure. I could talk for a while, but we should have coffee.
Good answer. Any other questions, comments? Well,
It's great that your enthusiasm is contagious.
Thanks.
We-
We just like,
we have been asked to approve the course. Do we have a motion?
I so moved to approve the new course, American Studies.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
thank
Good
you.
luck.
Yeah, best of luck. Thanks a lot. All right. Before you leave, Laura Fulmer brought up an important point that I would like to revisit. Danny is leaving. And I just want to say, when I first joined the board, I have a business background in economics and finance, and I wanted to go through all of the financial statements and budgets and look through everything and understand it and make sure that everything. For anyone who's tried to do that, it is a nightmare. It's not like anything that the business world has ever seen. And I was so grateful to be able to talk with Danny and have her help me understand how the pieces fit together to some extent, but to a greater extent, to know that we had someone on our team who understood this and could help us. And Laura, you're fantastic too in doing all this work. But you're a great team, and I don't know what we're going to do. But we're going to miss you one way or the other. And
I do remember all the conversations that we had.
yeah, and I would like to, I think this is a great opportunity to celebrate the great work that you've done. And I think that, Laura, did you want to say something?
Sure, yeah. You mind if I come up?
Oh, please.
Okay.
Anywhere you
I have
want.
a little cheat sheet, because public speaking's not my thing, but Ben Haig did ask me to just reflect on Danny's tenure here at Ojai Unified a little bit, and gosh, 18 years, I can't believe it. It's just been, she came to our district, she was, I don't know if some of you know that, she was in our audit, she was an auditor from our independent CPA firm that comes every year to audit the district, and Danny was the auditor. So she had the inside view of Ojai Unified, and I'm sure she could have picked any district in the county or to go to work for, and she chose Ojai, so we were so fortunate. Extremely fortunate. So she's just been an amazing person to work for. We've been through a lot together in the business office, just taking on the new SACS accounting that the state mandated. That was a huge thing for us to go through, and Danny was such an exceptional leader, leading us all and guiding us. And then we had a software change at the same time at the county level, and it was just like overwhelming, but we just had such a strong leader that, we made it through, and it turned out to be a really great thing. Now we have a wonderful system, and Danny's management style, she was always open door and open heart, and she referred to the business office staff as her work family. And, sorry, I'm getting emotional, which we are, and always will be, as Dan. So, what else do I want to say? I just wanted to speak on behalf of all 4 classified directors that Danny hired, and we work directly under her, that she's just been a wonderful leader, great friend, and we will miss her. And a never-ending support of us. So, and we wish you the best success on Easy Street. I've been referring to it, but
thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Thanks a lot. I really should add to my comments that I do wish you well. We just feel sorry for ourselves.
I know. Everyone who comes and says it's bittersweet, and I said, well, I have the same thing. I'm happy, but I'm sad at the same time. You know, I grew up here in Ojai for my career, and it feels weird to leave. Sometimes I go, oh, did I make the right choice? You know, oh, should I stay? They haven't filled it yet.
Yeah, when you showed up for the interview with a wig, that's
kind of odd.
Well, it is still open.
and I'm sure each of the 3 new board members has developed an impression of you and your work. And I told Thane I'd go last, so I certainly want to turn over the opportunity to Mike and Jane and Kevin, but I'll back clean up.
Go ahead. Well, I'll just briefly say I've been very impressed with the level of detail and the amount of work that you produce. I mean, I certainly am mindful of, for example, on something like bylaws. I mean, my head was going to explode looking at some of that stuff and knowing that you, had gone through those line by line, and on top of all the other things that you do and all the other detailed work that you're responsible for. Kudos to you.
Thank you. Well, Thane, I didn't know you did that, because I've been doing that to her for the last 6 weeks. What does that mean? What is that? What is that? So I do appreciate that. I know she has a job to do, and at the same time, she's been answering my questions for the past 6 weeks or 2 months, and also the amazing amount of other things that you're doing. You're on the board at the charter school. You were representing us at the insurance forums at the Ventura School Board. So those extra above and beyond your job it's been amazing to, as I learned, and I see Danny's name on there again. No, there's something else. So I appreciate that. We appreciate that, and that'll be hard to find. So good luck. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wish we had more time to work together. I know very little. I know enough about what you do to not want to do it. And I will echo what Thane says. It's very complicated and it's very detail oriented, and there's very little margin for error. And it takes a special kind of mind to be able to handle that and still be able to have people talk about a family. So it's a loss for us, and it's a loss for us new board members that we're not going to get to work more closely with you. But I congratulate you. I think it's a great move for you. So we'll miss you, but good luck.
So I would say a few things that are sort of in summary form that I think reveal a lot about 5.5+ years that we've been together. And probably a way to start is the fact that about 6 hours ago or so, we were having lunch laughing about stuff that we can't divulge. But I think the point is that Danny is a person who is not unique within her field, but certainly in the minority in her field, and that is sort of exactly what Laura said, that she has an open door and an open heart. And a lot of people who do what she does on the most distressing end of the continuum, it's the old 1970s green eye shades version of being a business person, which then results in it's my money, and I'll let you know about it when I decide you can know about it. And that's just not the way she is. As Martha knows and Chuck knows, we have a relationship among Laura and Chuck and Martha and their chief people, whether it's negotiator or not, and Danny and me, that every dollar we know about, you'll know about. And you can't do that with every business person because they're just extremely reluctant to share that kind of information, worrying that somebody, including the superintendent, by the way, will use it in a way that is distressing to that person. So I can give you some perspective, obviously working with now probably double-digit chief business officials in my career. that Danny is the best person at keeping many balls in the air. And there are a lot of balls in the air when you're in a small school district here, because everything we do here is exactly what they do in a 20,000 student school district, or 40 or 60 or 80. You all have exactly the same departments, right? So those directors to whom Laura was referring, now there may be 3 or 4 strata of directors in those other places, but those people do exist. And Danny's the person who manages all of those non-academic areas of the district in just an exemplary way, in addition to being the person who looks out across the state for what might be coming, or typically what hasn't been coming, in terms of funding. So I want you to know that we're not just losing the chief finance person. Josh, good to see you here. So Josh and Laura here, both representing the directors. We're not just losing a chief finance person, we're losing a person who manages everything that I don't. Okay? And we have great support with the directors, we have great support from Marilyn, but when it comes sort of down to what you see when you walk into, quote, the superintendent's area, there are 2 people there, right? So either go this direction or you go that direction. And it's a loss well beyond the technical expertise, well beyond that. And we've had conversations over the years about, what are you going to do when you grow up? When you get past 40, let that out of the box. Not much past 40, to be honest with you. But what are you going to do? And as I wrote to people right after winter break, because we had a conversation over breakfast right around January 1st when she informed me that this thing in Encinitas was unfolding, and I think the right word is bittersweet, ambivalent, whatever the right term is, when you're really happy for the person and worrying about what's going to happen when that person leaves. The fact is that she's been here 18 years, and it's very, very unusual to have someone who is in her mid-40s who's been here 18 years, who's been in leadership as long as she has. So I couldn't agree more with Laura that we've been incredibly fortunate to have her here throughout that period of time as she grew up as an administrator, as a leader, as a financial operator of the district. The good news is she said she'll actually respond to our phone calls, respond to our emails, and I'm sure that around mid-May I'm going to learn even more how important you are, because that successor is not going to be here by mid-May. Okay, if we're lucky, maybe around that, but certainly between the end of spring break and whenever that successor comes, and after the successor comes, that we're all going to learn all those things to which Jane was referring. Not just the committees on which you serve, but the way in which you develop your reports and the way in which you deal with people and personnel and all that. So you know how much, number one, I have rooted for you to go on and do what you want to do, and also how much I'll miss you.
Thank you. And just so you know, we have contingency. I've met with each person that I oversee in departments, and we have contingency plans and things in place. So if things arise, I'll be more than happy. But no, I have so many years here at Ojai, and I'm just so happy. Laura and I have developed such a deep friendship along with other directors, and we always joke, what happens in Cabo stays at Cabo.
Well, Danny, to thank you and to congratulate you, we have a small gift for you. And wish you the very best. Now, at this part of the program, we're still in open session, but we'd like to invite everybody who's here to have some cake. And for those who are watching on TV, if you want to go to the kitchen and grab a snack. I think typically we don't eat as we continue, but we have a very long agenda. So why don't we grab some cake and then just continue the meeting.
And eat it too?
And eat it too.
Yeah.
Texted me we're not here.
Kathy?
I am.
She just asked her that we didn't get on TV.
I even started on my website.
It's recording, so David will have to put it up later. But is there something else programmed right now?
I don't know, I'll check, would you?
Oh, because it's Wednesday.
I'm gonna go home. Maybe that's the one. Keep watching on TV.
Also says it's not on.
Oh, Okay. Jane, this first one is email personnel. I have to go get this personnel issues, so she can go.
Thanks for everything.
Copies to her.
No problem. Bye. I guess they're not televising it on TV. I was gonna watch it while I'm drinking my glass of wine. I gotta go home and I'm like texting Julie. I'm like, take the potatoes out of the water. She's like, what? I'm like, I gotta go. All right, see you guys later. I'll see you at our first meeting. I'm Nicole Body, by the way. Hi. Nice to meet you. I walk by your house every day with my dog, my big dog. You guys have little dogs, right? Yeah. I know Lori from across the street. Well, who doesn't know Lori from across the street? Hey, Thane, how are you? I'm glad to see you guys put Phil on there, too. I love Phil. Phil's great. So it's awesome. Yeah, and the only person I didn't know was, I don't know who Sarah Turner is.
She's, Sandy, those are all in order for, oh no, McCullough, she does the bookkeeping for the treasurer.
Oh, cool.
But anyway, she's an officer.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, she should become the treasurer at Nordoff next year or the year after.
When Danny was out there, I just want to be sure I had.
Okay, cool. All right, well, I'm bummed you're not going on Monday to BMP. I was like, who am I going to talk to? Well, hopefully it'll be good tennis. I won't be talking to anybody else. Will be watching. But yeah, well, I'm not even. I'm going to LA Sunday night to visit a friend, and then I'm going to drive out Monday morning, like at 6 in the morning.
There we go.
You want to read that? Want to read
It
that?
says presented to Danielle Pusateri, and down there I'm Danielle Brooke. I went back to
Oh, that's right.
In appreciation for your outstanding leadership in Ojai Unified School District, Director of Fiscal Services, the year's Assistant Superintendent. So nice. Thank you.
Very good, prominent place.
Wonderful. And that's the perfect transition back. We have a few resolutions we've been asked to approve. The first is in recognition of Arts Education Month for March. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm just sorry Linda couldn't join for that. She would have been very enthusiastic. 7.3.4 in recognition of Women's History Month.
I get to move.
Fantastic.
And I would also like to say, we got all these things from the Black History Month.
Yes.
I would hope that the schools are doing
see.
something similar for these, for Art History Month and for Women's History.
Terrific.
I would love to see that.
We need a second for Women's History.
Second.
Fantastic. All in favor? Aye. In recognition of music in our schools. Motion to approve?
I'll motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, those were all unanimous, and now Danny's going to have to get back to work here on our second interim financial report, 7.4.1. You want to, I think we've read that, but
Yeah,
can
I'll
you
just do
explain?
I'll just give a quick overview. Presented for you is the SACS report, and then of course the budget update that I do, and in addition Laura does her highlights. And we are recommending for you to approve a positive certification in the second interim. The current fiscal year did not change materially, the fund balance only about $150. So I wasn't going to focus any time on, we're streamlining right through, everything's coming in as expected. And if you have any questions between any variances, Laura does that highlights sheet for you that shows you any variance over $10,000. She highlights for you and explains what change happened. What I wanted to focus on was the multi-year projection. I know that in January I came to you and explained that we had about a $650,000 budget gap, but then the governor's proposal with the new LCFF funding and the target gap made up about 456 of that gap. So remember, we had about 197 budget gap. Well, in this one, we're doing the same formula, same $650,000 budget gap, but there was a slight change in the target gap, which then allowed the fund balance or the budget gap to be reduced down from what I thought was 197 in January to about 135. So it was, you know, when you go through it the first time, then you get the actual calculator from the state and some things come to light. So we were very happy that it came down further. That meant that the one-time funds that we're planning to use for next year from the mandated cost one-time grant, we don't have to use as much. We only have to use 135 to get to ground zero rather than almost 200,000 that we were at that in January. And so we can carry, so what I've done in this budget projection is I've carried forward that difference, that $304,000, which is the leftover of the mandated block grant. I didn't expend any dollars in next fiscal year. I carried that forward as a fund balance to help offset the following year. So, because the following year is 16-17, and again, we're showing some budget gap difficulties, and the state did drop their percentage for the target gap. Remember, from where they were being funded to where they want us to be, currently they're about 38%. They dropped it back down to 28%. So as expected, when we come back in January in 2016, hopefully for that proposal, you know, the economy is looking good. I wrote in here housing, sales tax, everything's coming in strong, so we expect a good May revise. So I'm hoping that we won't have that issue in 16-17, that projection. But the main one I wanted to focus on was 15-16, was we're looking better. We don't have to use as much mandated cost grant. I told you that we've got our preliminary rates from CISC for our major medical. Remember, I budgeted 7%. It's in the assumption page. They gave us preliminary rates, said, well, you're going to be between 0 and 4. And I was like, all right. Usually when they do that, we're always on the low end. So we're usually, you know, when they give us a range 4 to 7, we're usually on the 7. So I'm very hopeful, but I'm not about to take a dime out of the budget until I see it, and we'll get those rates in April. So I won't be here.
I think you missed what you said. 4 to 7, you're usually at the 7. You mean at the 4?
I'm usually at the 4.
Got it.
Yeah. When they typically, in the past, when they've given us rates and said you're at this range to this range, for example, 4 to 7, I didn't want to use the 0.
Right.
But when you're at, because that's been unlikely that we've had a 0% increase. But typically they said, okay, your preliminary range for Ventura County is between 4 and 7. We've always been on the low end. So I was very hopeful that when they said it's going to be between 0 and 4, I was like, oh my goodness, you know, I'll take the 4, but I really want the 0. But I'm just saying right now, conservatively, we will probably be around 4%.
If you don't mind, can I take advantage of your knowledge again on this? Mm-hmm. When we get that rate, is that as to specific to our school district, or is that for the whole pool?
No, it's specific to when we get our rate, it's specific to us, to Ojai.
So how is our rate established as different from other people in our pool? Based on claims, based on
claims, based on region, because remember, CISC is in Bakersfield, mm-hmm. and so you can be anywhere in the state of California. You can be down in San Diego, you can be in up north, and you can buy in, so they regionalize the rates for us. So they're saying for the Southern California region, that's why they regionalize and say this Southern California region, somewhere between 0 and 4. They won't give us our exact rate until April. So in April, we'll get our exact percent increase. Now Laura has the contact information and knows when the board meeting is, and we'll get the exact rate. She'll put it into the budget, system, and we'll see, what savings. But remember, we still have workers' comp. That won't come in until June. We still have property and liability. That won't come in until June. Laura's going to be sitting, I sit on the board for as representative for this district for that JPA, so Laura's going to be attending the meetings. I already sent her the information, connected her with the executive director. Typically, I get it early because I'm usually an executive committee member, so I said, please give it to her early on my behalf, and so we worked out arrangements. So I like to get them early so we can get them in at least prelim 2. We won't have them for prelim 1, which will come in April or May, depending on, probably May. Sometimes we can get you a prelim 1 in April, sometimes not. So I'll give you a prelim 1 for next year. Prelim 2 is always the first meeting in June. And so we'll definitely have it for prelim 2. But yeah, we have other rates that aren't coming in. Unemployment insurance isn't in yet, so we're waiting on those rates. I don't expect to see anything on. Dental vision, we'll get those in April as well. So.
And what about Hank, when do this negotiations with the teachers, when is that?
Well, we'll start soon, you know. I'll be sharing, like I said, I'll do exactly what I said we've been doing now for 6 years. Well, a good example is everything that's on that piece of paper that is a projection for 2015-16, that's where we start, right? So they know that at least the initial plan is to use about half of that corpus that the governor gave us, granted us, $440,000 or so.
The mandated cost.
The mandated cost, right.
Now it's a little less than half.
Okay, so we use about half of that to get us to be whole. And the rest of it, sort of to be determined. And the to be determined part is what we're going to talk about.
And remember, I carried it forward in the projections. So if you guys decide to use that money for this year, it's going to affect more for the following year. Right. Because I carried forward. So if you go into it, you got to look at your projections and do.
But actually, let me answer your question better. Chronologically, since I'll be reporting, actually we have an agreement with the teachers union and the classified staff union. I'll be sending out a joint memo to all staff. I'll write it, but then they'll have a chance to edit it a little bit, explaining what's happening right now. So the whole staff will learn that we are considerably stronger in March than we were in January. That's sort of step one. Step two, we'll have a closed session, obviously consistent with the Brown Act, to talk about negotiations, and I'll learn the sort of the priorities of the 5 of you within those 3 parameters that we talked about, right, furlough days, compensation, class size, at various levels of how much money we might get. So I'll know that on April 21st. And then when the May revise comes in, right, which is the next time we'll learn about how much money we have, more, hopefully, by a lot, then, I can start, as it says in the document, I'm your chief negotiator, I can sit down and start talking with, in this case, the teachers and the classified staff, right, about what they would prefer, and we'll know what the numbers are, and I'll know what you would prefer. Right? So then it sort of rolls out, and we end up with an agreement.
Okay. Then Dana, can you explain to me that block of money?
The mandated cost block grant, it actually is mandated cost reimbursement. That is money that has been owed. It's part of the wall of debt, they call it up in Sacramento. It's money that has been owed to the district over years. Going back to 2000, I want to say, we used to get what was called mandated cost monies, and it was on a reimbursement basis. So we have, 25, 30 different things we're mandated to do. Scoliosis screening, we're mandated to negotiate. We're mandated to have these board meetings. We're mandated, the list goes on. So we have this list of things we're mandated. And I used to have a consultant come in, and I used to have to show them all the meetings, count the minutes, my time, Hank's time, because we're paid, negotiations, my time, Hank's time, Laura time, the teacher, and put them all in and show how much of a cost all these mandated things were costing, all the doctors to come in and do the scoliosis screening. So we used to have this very cumbersome paper reimbursement program, and we used to get about over $200,000, $250,000, $300,000. That ended in 2000. Then they stopped paying us and said, "We'll get you later, but you still have to do it." And so years went by of this, though they would trickle in things like this because there was a bunch of lawsuits that happened. And then they had the brilliant strategy, well, we'll put it into a block grant. So there's a separate thing called a mandated cost block grant. And they said, starting last year, if districts signed up for the block grant, it was like $75 per ADA. So it was like a little pittance. For us, it's like $75,000. If you sign up for the block grant and get this little coins, you get this little money, then you're required to do the whole list of those things we basically suspended, and you would no longer have to do the paper, or you could still do the paper. Well, the paper was so cumbersome, and they said, oh, in the paper, we're not sure when we're gonna pay you again, at some time. So you can either get a little bit in your hand now or later. So 95% of the districts took the little bit of the hand now, we needed it. And so what you see, you'll see two line items in the budget. One is the mandated cost block grant, which is the little $75 per, then the mandated reimbursement, which is all those years from 2000 to, that would be 2013, 14 or 12, 13, of payback for when we did the paper, when we did the time estimates, and we all turned in our paperwork. So they're paying us back for years and years, of which they probably owed us $250,000 probably for each year. So this payment was $440,000 of it. This year, for next year, this year we got $197,000. So they're starting to pay us back for the mandated reimbursement program.
Is there
it's one-time fund.
An accounting somewhere that says what we're still owed for
No,
this?
not at all. We never knew at the time. We would submit our claims and we'd have an amount, and they would come and they would audit us and tell us no and change it, and so you just accepted whatever you received.
Do we know if they believe they still owe us anything?
Yes, they do, and he admits it in every report. He'll say, and I know I still owe you the mandated block grant or the mandated reimbursement money, and I'm going to pay you. And this year he said, I'm going to pay you, we got 197, I can't remember what per ADA. This year he said, this year the joke was, he was like, I know I need, the joke was a cartoon. Where
who's he?
He's Governor Brown.
Oh, he's writing us notes? That's awesome.
Yes, the joke was...
Every district gets a separate note.
The joke was, the cartoon showed him that he knows he owes us, because he's written, I know I owe you. The cartoon showed him taking $1, and he was wanting to put it in the mandated cost because he knows he has to pay back, and so to show good faith he has to pay us something every year now. That was the settlement in the lawsuit. And so he's standing there with $1 in the bucket wanting to put it in the mandated reimbursement, but there's the Common Core implementation funds, and he wants to fund that too. So he's like, which one can I? So that was the joke, and so that's why when he said, I'll give it to you for mandated reimbursement, but I really would like you and incentivize you to use it for Common Core implementation, because that is a one-time fund and it's perfect use for the mandated reimbursement program. So we all chuckle because that's our accountant joke.
You have to be there.
I didn't do it justice. All right, sorry.
That's what you guys were talking about, laughing about that. You guys.
That was lunchtime.
And we know how forthcoming he is with money.
So we highly expect that May revise, so May 15th, we're going to receive more funds. I wrote in this document that the indicators are all strong. There's already dollars above the limit. He just has to recognize it and put it in the revision for us.
Great. So we're being asked to accept the...
Approve the second interim report. And Laura's here to ask if you have any questions on the detail highlight sheet. She's here for questions she can help you with.
Any questions?
I just want to confirm on the personnel reduction component, it has not changed?
On my assumption page?
Correct.
You mean for next year?
Yeah, we're working with the same assumptions.
We're going to,
Yes.
and so the two don't square with this and what I said. It could end up being zero, okay, but for this analysis, rather than say, let's put in 2, which is sort of what I was implying, right, okay, which is 120 to 40,000 or so, just for analytical purposes, we put in 0. So actually, that's another plus, right, isn't it? So, it's a plus financially, okay? So if in fact we can find ways to reduce, get our people back, right, but because we have 2 blocks of student enrollment drop, one elementary school, one high school, and we can still retain program, and we can reduce the staff by about 2, right? then that's another 120 to 40,000 plus to add to the fund balance, right? Because right now, it's based on zero. But, and I know Danny's pointed this out before, I'll do it again, it's based on a zero cut, but it's also based on retaining 2 furlough days. Right? So the three are back in here for instruction, but the 2 staff development days are still in the calendar. Okay, so Jane, we get to that whole issue of negotiations, right? They're the 220 to 50,000 or so. It's sort of offset. So if we do cut the 2 FTEs, right, and we want to add back the 2 furlough days, then you're at zero again. Okay.
And the thing I want you to pay attention to is if you look on the assumption page, which is this one, which is 7.4.1, page 5 of 11, this page. If you look where it says LCFF target funding gap amount, notice in this year we got 1.3. That was year over year. That's how much of an increase we have. Then you see in 15-16 it drops to 783,000. And remember I was talking, if you can recall, was the per ADA went up 8%, but we only realized 4% of that. That's that figure there. Notice in 16-17, 212. You notice it's going down because our enrollment's going down significantly. And the second thing is the target gap percentage above it. Notice it's 10% lower. So you need those 2 to go up to get that LCFF figure up.
So why were they slowly going up and suddenly they're going to go down?
The target gap, it's all state driven. The enrollment.
That's a great question. I don't get it.
It's the state doing their projections, so they say, okay, of the new monies, how much of the new monies are we going to allocate to LCFF? So at the time they projected they're conservative. They projected a smaller amount and then they make the formula and that's a certain percentage. And so just like, remember at first interim, the 14-15 changed and so did the 15-16. They manipulate the figure all the time. So, you have to wait and see, and they look on their revenues to see how strong they are and they decide how much of the revenue can they afford to put into the ongoing funds.
They had no problem on the expenditure side going up when we had to have a higher percentage payment, right?
Oh, with STIRS.
Every year on STIRS. Right. They had no problem with that. Oh yeah, let's say you're going to 8+%, and you're going to go to 19.
And you can see that down a little bit further. You'll see the STIRS retirement cost percentage increase. This year it was a 0.63, jumps up to 1.85, and then another that's built on top of it. So another 1.85 increase and another 1.85 increase, and you can see CalPERS is doing the same thing. It's a 0.25 and then you built another 0.82 and then jumps up to 2.4. That's huge cost increase, but oh wait, we only got $212,000 in the 16-17 year to cover 92,000 cost in PERS and 174,000 in STIRS. Not to mention step and column, not to mention health benefits at 7%. It's not enough. It's not enough to fund the cost of living adjustments straight on the percentage.
But it does look better for next year. So that's the bottom line is looks better for next year now, and will look better, we think, in May.
Could I just get a couple of details? One, part of this is, I think we'd all agree there's increased concern about unfunded pension liabilities in the state, right? So that's the reason why presumably they're having us pay more, I assume.
Correct, and don't forget, the state's picking up 3%.
But we had this conversation before, and I can't remember what the answer was, and Hank had chimed into. The gap is the percentage, the remaining percentage that we haven't been...
The target funding gap, is that what you're... Yes.
Right, so when there's a target funding gap of 29.15%, that means that
it's not out of 100. So it doesn't, you're not ever going to get to 100. What they say is...
What's missing?
Yes. Okay, so here you're missing, I want you to, you're at this dollar amount and you need a million more to get to the target. Right. I'm going to fund 30% of that million, 30% of the remaining funds.
Right, so in answer to your issue, Jane, it could be misleading because if the gap, if the actual gap is $1 million, if the gap used to be $10 million, and now the gap is $1 million, it could still, the gap percentage could be 50%, but down to $1 million.
But don't forget, on top of that is your COLA. So as you're looking at my COLA line, you have 0.85 to a 158 to a 210. In that dollar amount is also built in your COLA. So not only is what he's saying is the target gap percentage could be decreasing because the percentage owed is decreasing from where you are now to where you're going to be. But on top of that, don't forget, you're getting cost of living adjustments. You're getting on top of just your base funding. So that's not enough either. That's not 2.1%, 212,000. So you're getting 212,000 for the target gap, the COLA, but what's eating into that is the decline. So we're not getting a 2.1 COLA, we're not getting the target because the decline, we're not seeing the realization of that revenue because of our loss of kids. So you want to retain kids.
Well, and I do want to point out that one of my questions for you, Danny, which we had talked about last week, was this increase in revenues is sort of a ghost of an increase because it's required to go in certain areas. So it's not like, let me look at where I was. I guess that's maybe not on these projections. That's more on the stuff I was dealing with Laura, but. Where we might see an increase somewhere, oftentimes it's required. It's either going into the SEPA or going to the charter school. So it's not like we get to choose where we spend that money.
A lot of your money's predetermined. You've got your salaries and benefits already. You're going to take on the cost of the increase of those, your property and life. There's not a lot of discretionary funds now.
Any more questions? Comments? We could take a motion to approve the interim budget update.
You guys hand me these ones. You guys take the music, and then Kev gets the budget. I'll move to approve the budget.
You noticed that? Well, we appreciate it, Kevin. Laura and I do, for the support.
But somebody's going to have to second.
Solidarity, I'll second it.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay, 7.5.1 was moved. I think we can take these three together. We discussed at some length the issuance of the bonds in our last meeting, and that's 7.5.1. 7.4.2 and 7.4.3 establish funds that are required to make the bonds work.
Correct. Next week, when Hank and I go to San Francisco and talk with Moody's and get our ratings, then we go and sell the bonds in April. And when we sell the bonds, then we need a place to put the money. So the first 7.4.2 is where the money is going to end up. It's the proceeds. And then 7.4.3, the bond interest and redemption fund, that's where when you pay your property taxes, it goes to the county assessor's office, it goes into this fund, and is designated to pay those bonds back, right, from this fund. So we need these two funds to maintain the proceeds and to make the payments.
Right. Are there any questions or comments on these three? Then why don't we...
I do have one little one, which is just, what kind of interest do we earn on it while it's, what are the considered appropriate uses for the money while it's sitting dormant before we spend it?
We just get the regular county interest rate.
Okay.
So it's nothing special. We're limited for arbitrage rates anyway, so it's low.
Great. Then I would suggest we have a motion to approve 7.5.1, 7.4.2, and 7.4.3.
I'll move for all three.
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Then we will move to 7.4.4. Yes.
Superintendent, can I ask you to comment on one thing on what we just voted on? This is not spending any of this money, is it?
Hardly, no.
Okay.
It's just, it's the opportunity, as Danny said. Next step is to go up and hopefully get the strongest rating we can. You remember, we purposely waited until after tonight so that we could bring data from the second interim as opposed to the first interim. And so we're going to make our case, and we hope to get the highest rating we can, which of course then when we sell the bonds, it creates the lowest interest rate possible. And then the money comes and frankly sits for a while.
We're opening an account.
That's a good way of putting it. We're opening a very significant account, and nothing will happen with this money until lots of other things happen, including going back to what Bill was talking about, Bill Warwick was talking about. I'll be bringing to the board at the April board meeting a recommendation for a space utilization study. Okay, I am not, to underline, I am not going to bring a master facilities plan. Okay, they're two different things. We already did, through Balfour Beatty, a significant amount of work to learn about our facilities, what is needed, what's needed to make them work better. What we need to do soon is to take a look at our available space, and then the board, we're going to get to this later, must determine how many of the present 9 facilities, right, we'll need in the upcoming years, and at that point then you can start making your best decisions about where the money would go, and of course then we have to integrate the oversight committee into all that. It goes back to what Kevin was talking about, that some early on process, another open meeting on television of course, will be a conversation we would recommend, certainly the 3 of us would recommend, among the 5 board members, administrative staff who are involved, Josh certainly, and the members of the Oversight Committee, to talk about their role. Okay, so no money spent until many things happen.
Great.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay.
Good point, yeah. I forgot where we were. Did we?
7.4.
Oh, 7.4.4. That's it. We already voted. We're on 7.4.4. This is, I think, quite describe.
I will. Well, this is a really pretty cool program that I want to give the city leadership certainly a significant amount of credit for. About 4 years ago, turning to me and Nanny and saying, if we could turn over funds we get from Time Warner for our cable TV programming, could you use those funds well? And of course the answer was yes, and we already had the Media Arts Academy, and so the significant amount of money that we received, which is in excess of $50,000, as I've told you since then, went really right to that program, and I can send you a comprehensive list of the kinds of equipment that Tom Friedman has purchased. And the program really has increased significantly in this period of time. So the agreement actually sort of ran out a little while ago, but Steve McClary, who's the deputy city manager, said, can you just give us a little more time to sort of figure out our needs? Because in that period of time when we were getting 50,000 plus, they really weren't getting anything. They were giving us all the money, okay? Except at the very front end, they had some equipment they had to install in order to get their TV programming better. Now, it just so happens that the end of the 3-year agreement coincides with their need to buy some more equipment for a variety of reasons, all of which I completely understand. And as I've said to some people, they don't have to give us anything. They really don't. I mean, it's great that they do, and it's great that we have this synergistic relationship. And so I worked out with Steve that since they have a greater need right now than we do, although we always have a continuing need for more equipment for the Media Arts Academy, that and we might have a greater need in the upcoming year or years than they do, why don't we create a flexible concept, which you can see is articulated in the very beginning on item number 2 on the first page. Let's be flexible. Let's say that we're going to trust each other, which we do, and that conceptually the city manager and the superintendent would sit down and talk about the needs for that particular upcoming year, with the understanding that, let's just say with $20,000, which is approximately right, it's 18 to 20, depends on the year, that neither organization would receive less than 25%, therefore no one would get more than 75%, and that's the only change in the agreement. So what made sense in 2011 still makes sense in terms of all of the other legalistic language. That one change is we got everything because out of their benevolence, and now we're just saying we're going to keep it flexible in that range of 25 to 75%. So I recommend that we approve it. The City Council's already approved this concept back a couple of months ago, and I think it's a very workable arrangement.
Great. Are there any questions, comments?
Sounds well thought out.
Thank you.
I think it's, as Hank mentioned, I think this is really more about the positive relationship we have with the city and our ability to work together.
Well, and in fact, okay, so, when board members during the campaign and when it came on, there was, and we all know, there was a very significant interest in being televised, right? And so we were able to access the balance of that fund that we had received over the 3 years in order to get the equipment televised.
All right. If there's a motion to approve the agreement,
I'll move to approve it.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and then on to 7.4.5, the developer fee justification study.
Danny, this is yours.
This is mine. You have the study in front of you. What this is we collect developer fees. So if you're in the city or county limits and you want to build a new home or a business, and you want to add on, you not only have to pay fees and things to the city and or county, but you have to come to the school district and pay fees. Right now, currently the fees are $3.20 for residential and 50 cents for commercial per square foot. And those fees are $3.20 for residential per square foot and 50 cents for commercial per square foot. And so those fees are collected in the business office on a form. We work in conjunction with the city and the state because those individuals go to there first, have a form, they come to us, and they can't finalize their permits with the city or county until they get our sign off on this form. And those funds then, when the people give us the checks, those funds are deposited in the capital facility fund. So there's a separate fund that we hold that is just for the collection of that, and we spend it on modernization type projects. For example, the fitness center at Matilaha, we took the old wood shop. We no longer have wood shop, and we converted it to the new fitness center. That was used capital facilities dollars because we modernized that classroom. So we use those type dollars. Those dollars, you can do roofing, any type of modernization, we use those funds. When I first started here in '97, it was always about $130,000. That's about what came through every year on a real consistent basis. And so, we save up for a few years because $130,000 goes like that for a construction project. So I would save up the funds and then work with maintenance and then say, okay, we have, a pot now. What do you need? What do you have? And so when we didn't have the bond, this was our go-to place when we had this fund and deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance no longer exists at the state level. But we would have deferred maintenance in this when we didn't have bond money, so we'd go here. So what happens is every 2 years, the state allocation board says you can increase, they'll increase the developer fee rate. They set the rate at the state level. So every January of an even number year, they'll increase the rate, and then we have to do a developer fee study to see if we have the need to increase the rate as well. And then we come to you, show the justification study here of what the need is. Again, it's the need of modernization projects, and we have $100 million need. The bond was 35 of that. We have a gap that this would fill a little portion of that gap. So we're asking to increase to the state level for the level 1 fees of 16 cents per residential square foot and 4-cent increase for commercial. When I started, it was about $130,000. When the boom hit for the housing market, a lot of people and there was a good valuation on buying your home when you could get good refinancing and people were adding on and building on their home. It peaked about $350,000 during those few years. We were getting significant increases. Now it's back down to about $130,000 a year. So it's back to when I started. You were going to ask a question?
Yeah. How long does each justification last?
It's every 2 years. We do it steady.
And frankly, mindful of some of Mr. Wyrick's comments and some
You know what? I left, so I have no idea what he said. I couldn't find my report, so I went looking for it.
Actually, why don't we, to make our public hearing,
Well, that's my, so.
Useful, right, why don't we open the public hearing and then we'll discuss.
Okay.
Then we'll close the public hearing. So if we could have a motion to open the public.
I'll have a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, let's talk.
So my question is, what if we were to make this decision at our next board meeting? Is that still timely?
No problem.
And the issue,
I won't be here. You
Yeah.
won't get to see my son.
The issue raised by Mr. Wyrick, and I think there's some merit, is that there are some references in the document that probably are not fully accurate, or at least, arguably might use some editing. For example, it says that that students projected from new development may exceed the capacity of existing school facilities.
The resolution's just really a catch-all. It's a boilerplate
That's exactly
catch-all.
what I thought when I read it.
That's all it is.
The justification.
Well, we can strike stuff.
The justification is here. I'm telling you on page 1 why we are saying we meet why we meet the increase for level 1 fee. So it's boilerplate.
Well, and they may exceed school facilities where the roofs don't leak and there's not air conditioning.
We definitely need the money, so the sooner the better. 16 cents, not significant, but
Are we currently in a dormancy period where we're not getting it because we haven't done this, or?
Yeah, well, I had this report actually done in the summer, and I was just so busy I didn't bring it to you guys. So we're actually probably a year behind, because they did it in January 2012. I engaged Mr. Candidate to do the report in March. He finalized it in June. We were going through all that bond stuff in June. I just put it on the back burner, and then I thought, oh my goodness, I'm leaving. I better get this off my.
But we're still collecting.
We collect the $3.20. We're not collecting the increase.
We're losing 16 cents.
We're losing 16 cents per square foot.
Modernization.
And 4 cents
the
per
Ohio School
commercial.
District.
Yeah.
But if there's a section we want to delete, we probably can without impacting the force of the document.
I'm sure
we can.
We can, yes.
I would like to do that too, put it off.
All right, we can.
When I read it, I kind of laughed at those points, but I assumed the
We'll
same
lose
thing.
16 cents for another
It's-
month.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, no, I mean, as far as
So
the
if you're
amounts-
watching at home, put off your construction.
No, pay it now, because you won't pay the, don't put it off.
For one more month, so we can get that. All right.
I tell you, when you're.
Oh, you're backwards, so we can get the increase.
Yeah.
When you're paying it, it feels like a lot. I haven't done
I bet it does. Oh, yeah. I bet it does.
very hard to.
It's about $10,000 on $1 million bucks. I mean.
So the question I have from my
Well, since I won't.
formal thing, if we're doing a public hearing today, can we just agree to change this next time without a public hearing?
Well, what I'll have to do is, because I put this in the advertisement in the newspaper already, so I'm going to have to go re-advertise it. I'm required 10 days before the board meeting to advertise twice in the newspaper. So I'll do that before I leave, so I'll look at when the next board meetings and make sure you're in compliance, and then redraft the letters to the county and to the city to enact the increase. So there'll be stuff that I'll have to leave for somebody to do in my absence.
And we're doing that because language in the boilerplate doesn't apply to us. That's the reason.
Well,
I mean, the other alternative.
That's why we're doing it, but I think it's a resolution.
Okay, I'm saying that is the reason. That's fine. Okay.
I mean, the other alternative, if there are specifics, I mean, if we want to go through it carefully, we can, but if there are sections that are just a problem that we want to get rid of tonight, we can get rid of them tonight, too.
I thought of that, but I think it merits just, there are a few sections that kind of make references to things that I don't think are factually accurate.
So we'll put it on the agenda for next.
It's okay.
Do we want to discuss who will go through it and look at whether it's better?
I'll go through it with Danny. And Kevin, would you like to participate? You're good at this.
If you want to send me...
You're good at this.
Sure. I mean,
Okay.
All right. Well, I think we should close our public hearing then.
Let me make something, hopefully it's already abundantly clear. I fully agree, it's boilerplate, and if Danny told me that we were going to lose a material amount of money, I would say let's strike it out. But I think we can get it perfect, and why not?
Okay, fine.
I agree.
All right. Motion to close the public hearing for tonight.
I'll move.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. All right, we will move on to 7.4.6. Do you want to explain this, Danny?
Oh, sorry, I was writing a note to do this again. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
So I wouldn't forget. CDR, this is not, just to make clear, this is not Las Posas Children's Center, the new lease that we did in December that you guys did for us. This is CDR, Child Development Resources. They were the company that took over the Smart Start, if you recall Dana Huffman and her Smart Start group. They took over the Smart Start preschool and Head Start program. So they're the kids under kindergarten age. And LPCC does the after-school student care.
And also meet a standard for family income.
Correct,
Yes.
correct, low income, correct. They called me up, CDR, Jack Hinojosa, called me up and requested and said, you know, they're feeling the impact of the decline in the valley of student preschool enrollment, and just as we are experiencing it in the grade levels. And he requested, he said, the portables that are on the sites, there's 2 at Matilaha, 1 at Miramonte, and 1 at Miners Oaks. They're under a lease contract with the state, and from him. So CDR to the state. We have no involvement in whatsoever.
You meant Topa Topa.
2 at Topa Topa. I said 2 at Topa Topa, 1 at Miners Oaks, and 1 at Miramonte. So there's 4 total portables that are leased from CDR to the state. And we have no involvement on that whatsoever. We just give them the license to sit on our property and perform the services for preschool and Head Start. He said because of the decline, they're looking at doing a cost efficiency for expenditures, and they did an investigation and found out that if they could extend and make a longer lease agreement, before our agreement was 3 years, if they could do a 10-year lease agreement, it would save the dollar amount. What I put in here, it would save $51,000 a year, $4,265 on a monthly basis for an annual basis of $51,000. So that was significant for their program. So what he requested is that I bring to you a revised contract with a new term of 10 years. And so I told him, you know, I have no problems doing it. Just so you know, we've done this before when Smart Start was here and they received the portables, the lease payment, and did the one at Topa Topa. They needed a 20-year lease to make it cost effective. And we, as you guys as a board, the previous boards, went ahead and gave a 20-year lease contract to Smart Start. So it wasn't unheard of, and in order to have a governmental agency help out another company keep their costs down due to the decline, I said I will be more than happy to make the change. Made sure the CDE, California Department of Education, was happy with the language because they're the ones who are going to approve it. So I made sure I got their stamp of approval before I even brought it to the board, that they were happy with all the language, and so they're requesting 10 years. There's no operational impact or financial gain or incentive on the district. It does have our state. Or loss, nothing, is neutral for us, but it does help out another organization that's feeling the impact.
So can you explain a little bit how it helps them? Is it just that
they save money because they are able to annualize their payments over a longer period of term. It's like refinancing. They're able to refinance over a longer, instead of a 3-year term, a 10-year term, which brings down their costs. So it saves them that $51,000, which is huge for them.
Right.
And so I said I'd be more than happy to bring it to you and have you guys look at it. We have all our, if something happens and you know, we want out, there is the out clause for us to get out, but again, it's helping out another organization that's serving the younger population kids that we will eventually receive, hopefully, as kindergartners and come through our system.
In regards to that termination, what I see is we have sole discretion if they've violated the terms.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
correct.
not an
we have and they're really good. If their complaint comes up, we've had complaints in the past, minor things. If the complaints come to me, I work with Jack. They're very good at addressing them. We work together. We collaborate. They're a good partner.
So absent a violation of this agreement, though, we're bound for 10 years.
Although, Michael, it does say that unless we decide that we want a we need the facility for our use.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking
for. There's out clauses.
Oh, I see. All right. Yeah.
if the district decided we needed it again for our exclusive use, we could say, sorry, we're using it.
Great, thank you.
So I figured I'd bring it to you guys and,
Right. So we're being asked to approve. Are there questions or comments?
You know, I'm familiar with CDR and in other contexts that they've done remarkable work, and I think it's a good connection with the district.
Where is it? Where is it? Where do you,
We've got them at Oxnard College.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. I think it's a benefit to the students of the district,
And the
younger
families.
students and the families, absolutely. Can we have a motion then to approve?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Moving on to 7.5.2, the K-12 Comprehensive Safe Schools Plan. We're asked to approve the school plan. Are there any comments or questions?
I was really impressed. This was this stuff, right?
That was it.
Yep. No, really, a lot of work, a lot of things taken into consideration.
I found, the question that you asked, about a couple of the schools and then the follow-up, we have a big follow-up from Josh, which we'll get to at another point, but the specific follow-up from Dave Munson, did you guys see that?
Now, are these
Okay.
guys aware of my question?
No, okay, so, well, you can tell the question.
I saw your question.
Yeah,
Just to
okay.
use it as an example of sort of the work and then the thought that goes into it. Okay. I'll send it out. I'll send it out on Friday. But the main thing was Jane asked a question, looking at that in particular about 3 schools, Nordoff, Mirabani, Topatoka, and then Josh had a more comprehensive answer, but Danny got to Dave Monson, who then responded. It was pretty amazing, how much thought he'd given to if there, God forbid, was a fire that engulfed the campus. What would you do? Or if there's a fire that engulfs part of the campus and you can't exit the way you think you're going to exit, then what do you do? And, you're right, there's a lot of thinking that goes into it. And Josh's answer was more comprehensive about sort of how we deal with pockets of kids, age group kids and things like that. But I found that very interesting. So I'll send that out on
Well, it was helpful
tomorrow.
because my first thought
No,
is
Friday.
go to the football field.
Yeah.
But when they brought up the lights and
Yeah,
the poles and,
right.
the earthquake, if it's an earthquake, you don't want to go there.
You could have the standards fall down to. I think there's, anyway, you're right. There's a lot of work going into it.
I was impressed. I don't have any concerns at all.
Great. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. At this point, we have a couple of items left, but one is going to take some time. So this, I believe, would be an appropriate time to take a break for some food, for some snacks. We will continue in open session, and everyone who's here is invited just a couple hundred feet away where the food is. But to not be here all night, is 15 minutes enough?
That's funny.
Great.
Just tell everybody, it's now 8:25.
So I will be here ready to go at 20 till, and I hope everyone else is as well.
Very good.
Great.
Thank you. I don't know. Kathy? Just turn that off for a minute. I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
She's been behaving well.
Moving on to item 7.5.3, and I had asked for this to be on the agenda, and let me preface this just a little bit because the way it often works for school boards to make decisions is staff will do a lot of research on every topic, set up committees, go through a whole process, and then deliver it to us in a nice package with a bow on it and say yes or no. And in most of those cases, it's in such a beautiful package that it's a pretty easy decision whether to vote yes or no on something. And if it's no, it typically never even gets to us. when we met on the 31st in our planning session, we skated over a whole lot of important issues. And there are a lot of critical issues facing our district that really need to be addressed at some point, and relatively soon. But it seemed to me that if we went through the regular process of doing this, it could take years, and it could tax our staff so tremendously in trying to put all of these things together that it didn't make sense to me. And so what I thought would be useful for us, and because this board has been so outspoken about wanting to talk to the public and about wanting to accomplish things and about wanting to be forthright, I thought it was a great time to say, okay, these are things we're willing to discuss and willing to talk about. These are things that we're never going to do, so why waste the effort of the staff to bother with it? And these are things that we don't know, that we really need more information to decide. Also, having said that, if you watch TV and if you've ever been elected to a public office, the hardest thing to do for an elected official is to make a decision. Because if you do, somebody's not going to like you. And so that's a tough thing. And so I'm asking us to kind of do a little bit of a tough thing, but in a way that I think will save our district huge resources in terms of figuring out what we're going to do. Nothing that we talk about here is a decision to do anything or not to do anything. It's simply to say, this is something that I would be supportive of moving towards. This is something that I just absolutely wouldn't want to do, or this is what I would need to know to do that. So this is going to take a few minutes, but I think it could potentially save us years in moving the process forward. And I would not want to ask anybody to do anything that I'm not willing to do. So what I think I'd like to do is go down these points. If we fully discuss each of them, we'll be here until Saturday or Sunday. But just if there are some brief comments that you feel are important, let's do that. What I thought I'd do is on each point, I'll tell you what I marked on my paper. Maybe we can go around the table, Hank can tabulate, and then that will give us kind of a framework for moving forward over the course of the next months to schedule public meetings, to discuss things, perhaps to set up committees, and to talk about the things that we think are worth talking about. And more importantly, not talk about the things we don't think are worth talking about. I think that's the bigger issue here. So item number one, and then why don't we just do it the same way for sake of speed and not having to talk about it. I'll start, and then Jane and Michael and Kevin, and we'll come back around. And hopefully
we have a question.
Absolutely. If there's a question, we can talk about it. But this isn't a retreat. This is kind of a... I think of it as taking the pulse of the board. That we're not doing a full physical exam, but we're just kind of taking our pulse. Sale of all district office property. And so those of you who don't have a copy of this, we have a chart here where we say we'd favor it, we would oppose it, we need more info, or no additional information is desired. So on sale of all district office property, I would oppose selling all of our district office property.
So my question is that information that we received for that sort of development of this property, that was based on a lease, not on a sale of the property.
That was a lease.
Okay, so I'm agreeing I would oppose the sale.
Yeah, I think pretty consistently, I'm not interested in talking sale of the district of this property here, all the way down there. The lease is more what I'm interested in.
Okay.
You know,
what I forgot to say, let me just do this. What I forgot to say is saying I don't want to answer or no comment is a perfectly appropriate response.
And that's not where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is, candidly, this reminds me somewhat of an exercise we were asked to participate in from the newspaper, you know, where I feel like it's a little narrow for my purposes. But I don't mind saying I am, for multiple reasons, generally opposed to selling the district property.
Okay.
And I will say, you know, that beyond that I believe that this area of Ojai is an important part of Ojai. And, you know, as I've said before, I've said somewhere, I think that there should be a Hippocratic oath, so to speak, of development, that being do no harm first. And I have serious concerns about how we would irrevocably change the town of Ojai if we were to do a major development of this area.
Right. Great. Lease of all district office property. I had to go to need more information. The only way I think I would support it is if there were an appropriate tenant who came to us and wanted to lease it all. I would not want to actively go out and do it, so I would need more information.
Well, and the question arises in there, of course, with the skate park. Whoever is leasing it is leasing it with the knowledge that that piece has already been leased.
Right.
So, no, I'm in favor of it, and again, I think you could certainly find tenants that were better suited to Ojai than others.
Yeah, I think in favor is maybe a little bit of a stronger statement. I'm willing to consider it. You know, I would entertain proposals that included a lease. I agree with Kevin. What we did with it, I think, would be important. I think we have a responsibility. Obviously, also, it depends on, you know, where we go with where the city is on anything that a developer wants to do. So there's a lot of provisos in there. But I would entertain that, yes.
I actually want to also add in there, you know, I do feel like some sort of a facilities plan or master plan, or what Hank was talking about, knowing, you know, okay, we have a school, how many classrooms does it have, and how many classrooms is it using, and what are they using them for?
Yeah.
I think that's important. So.
And I just want to comment on that too, that it would be really tough, in my mind, to create a master plan without addressing these topics. Because if we're indecisive about what property we're going to take care of, then how do we have a master plan to take care of it? Anyway.
Hank, the question that Jane asked about the prior proposed development being a lease, that was really the development of this entire block, right? So from my perspective, you know, there's a seeming simplicity about distinguishing between sale and lease that, in my view, is not really a great distinction. For example, the proposed development, which is a quote lease, was a 100-year lease or
66.
60.
Okay, 60-year lease. You know, most of us won't even be around by then. At least I can speak for myself. You know, we're talking about a lease that's really in the character of, it may be called a lease, but you're really handing over property to somebody who's obviously going to spend millions and millions of dollars on a development which they are going to need to be able to then utilize at a fairly full level in order to recoup that investment. So to me, that's part and parcel of the same concerns I have about sales. So to me, that's not a very significant distinction.
To me, I would agree with that smells like a sale more than a lease. Yeah.
Now that said, you know, if Brooks or some school or someone who is going to actually utilize the current facilities were to come in and we were to have an opportunity to monetize this location in a way that is relatively consistent with the current plan, then I, of course, would be interested. We're desperately in need of money. But that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Thank you. And that's where I was going to on, if an appropriate tenant suddenly became available, then it would be worth talking about. Okay, on sale of the maintenance yard and open space. For the right money, I would favor that.
I kind of put these all together because to me, I don't know about separating out the property. Maybe I don't know the property well enough to really, I mean, I would have to go out and say how much of it is used. I've certainly driven through it. I know where the buses are, I know where the gas pump is, and I know to the back, but I don't know how much of it is, how small of the space could they be squeezed to if they had to be? Where would they be if we sold that piece? So, so I guess I would need more information before I could make a call on that.
Yeah, I kind of would want to know where they would go and, you know, what it would cost to put them in an alternate location. The other thing with the rest of these is that, you know, as you start to fragment up the land, I wonder the viability of using small pieces versus larger pieces. So, you know, I'm willing to entertain almost anything. I have a strong bias against actual sale, just because maybe it's illusory, but there's something about holding on to the asset and potentially getting some kind of a revenue stream from it. But so yeah, I would consider it, but I don't tend to favor that.
Maybe we should just lump all the rest of the, rather than going through these one at a time, just to lump all the rest together. And maybe we should go around one more time just with that whole lumping thing. Where I would distinguish is I would not want to sell the historic district or chaparral property. I mean, that's just not something I would want to talk about. The rest of the property, if somebody came in with the right plan, I would be very open to discussing that.
One thing that does occur to me, and in terms of quote-unquote responsible usage of the property, you know, a sale, you pretty much give up your ability to do that, to assure how somebody uses the property. And you can get certain assurances ahead of time, but once it's their property, they're pretty much going to do what they want.
Well, not if we didn't sell the whole thing.
I mean, in whatever part we do sell.
Oh, right.
Where a lease does at least allow us to maintain some potential use of the property ourselves, which means that we could potentially benefit from whatever leasehold improvements that person is putting in. But it also means that we have a certain amount of control over what actually happens there.
Right.
I think it's an interesting concept. I hadn't really ever thought of it in great detail before. You know, I feel like in response to Michael, I feel like we could, even selling something, you could certainly be in a position, I think, to have an idea about what is being planned for it, but you're probably right. I mean, at some point we actually give up control.
That's what I'd be afraid of.
I mean, you can put restrictions in a deed, but
yeah, but that's probably limited. Wouldn't be, you know, most
as
people,
attractive. Yeah,
hard to get financing on something that with a lot of restrictions. But
well, you've got zoning too, so they have to go to the city.
But I know this sounds like kicking a can down the road, but really in my mind it's not. As Mike says, you know, the right project, you know, something beneficial to the community, something I don't know what that would be, but I've heard of things before. Peter Strauss having some idea for using, you know, some kind of a theater, things like that I find intriguing. I'm definitely not some fuddy-duddy who says, you know, never change anything, but I do feel like we have a very unique situation in Ojai that I, as a public servant, feel like, one, I'm obligated to maintain, and two, it happens to be consistent with my own view.
Any
I want
other-
to add one
yeah,
thing.
sure.
When we talk about, and Hank used the word, when we were talking about last time, he gave me the word corpus. Whatever money we got, I would also be concerned to the extent we ever sold anything, that corpus, that property that's now been converted to some finite amount of money, that money would be put in placed in a context in which it is being retained and we're using proceeds from it, but we're not actually taking out of the corpus itself, because to me that is a public resource that should be available for future generations and not just used up by us. And I say that as somebody whose kids will be out of the school district in 6 years. It would be great for me, but
Typically on the sale of property, the proceeds must go back to facility upgrades and upkeep and things like that. And there are regulations that you have to follow. So there is that caveat for January 1st, 2016. If you get proceeds before that date, you can use it for general operating, but typically it's meant for capital outlay.
How many times has that deadline been extended?
Twice.
Okay.
Does it mean?
You're talking about like an endowment.
kind of. And when I said 6 years, I'm sorry, I meant 12. I was like, what am I talking about?
I was wondering about that.
Precocious kid.
Where's you going to go to junior high?
Right, but just, yeah, but I would think that those funds could be put in a fund that could not be spent on anything other than capital expenditures, but could be invested and not spent right away, or does it have to roll over?
Yeah, I think my understanding, and this is not all my expert from the minimal amount of research I have done, is the money has to go back into facilities. Whether there's a time frame and you can leave the money sit there and collect the small interest rate, maybe interest rates will get more, I don't know, so the interest bearing, but no, you cannot go and invest it in something else to make a higher return, because that's operating expenses and debt service. You have to use it to go back into your facilities, taking off that exception for the January 1st, 2016.
That's a huge exception. I mean, when we had the 7-Eleven committee, that was a big topic of conversation. And I think, I won't speak for the 4/5 of you, Belinda, were here, but I'm pretty darn sure that if we had signals or we knew, let's just pick a date, October 2015, that 2016 deadline or time would not be extended, that it was going to end. I have a feeling after we just passed a $35 million bond issue that the board is going to feel a whole lot different about doing anything, sale or lease, if you can only use the money for facilities. I mean, I speak for myself. My interest level would diminish radically, okay, if the only way we could use that money is in the facilities. I mean, our big need, now that we have Measure J passed, is in the general fund for staff and education. So, we would need to do some research, call the right people, call Annabeth Jackson, call Doss Williams, say, we need, if we're going down this path, we need to have this extended 2 more years. Okay, it's been extended twice, 2 more years. I agree that that's the general concept, but
that has been the long-standing concept. It was only brought up for 4 years.
Right.
It was for 2-year option. There was 2 years you could do it. Then they extended it 2 more years. So that was just a one-time thing that happened. Prior to that, it was always sell it. You, at that time, give up your deferred maintenance dollars. We don't have those anymore, so congratulations, give it up. We don't have it. But before that, it was give up your deferred maintenance dollars. You can't get involved in any more state school building projects. So if the state, that's another thing you give up, is you give up getting into the state school building project. So if the state decides to pass another K-12 facility bond or K-14 facility bond, and we get in line to get our portion of it, of matching funds, if you sell property, you can't. If you sell property and you're not doing the general obligation, operating, and you do it for facilities, you give up that right. So there are certain repercussions, when you sell property.
Does any of that apply to a lease?
No, which is why we entertain the lease. And why we entertain the joint occupancy lease too. There was having a presence on here. There were more wider available uses, and that's why we picked the joint occupancy lease.
You had access to lease funds to use in your
General.
Okay, well, I think that's illuminating.
It is.
The move of 6th grade to Matilaha, and I think the caveat on all of these things is that we would have to have money to do it. But that's something, there are, as the committee outlined, I think there are reasons to be concerned about it and there are reasons to favor it, but it's something that I would favor.
I would hear arguments. I don't know whether I would favor or oppose it. I do have, having sat through those meetings, there was a lot of really great ideas and exciting thoughts about a middle school here, but I have a lot of concerns about it as well. So I don't need more information, but I would have to hear what is being actually proposed at that time.
Yeah, with the caveat, of course, the money. What I heard tonight in terms of some of this collaborative curriculum stuff, if that can be extended throughout the middle school, which is what I heard him saying, I think that's a worthwhile effort. A lot of the other counter arguments that I saw look like change issues that need to be dealt with over time and that are inevitable no matter what. But I didn't see anything that looked unsurmountable. And frankly, up until tonight, I wasn't exactly sure why there was a really good reason to do it. But this curricular reason is kind of a clincher for me. So I would be enthusiastic. I would consider it. I can't say yes, but I think I would.
Well, we're not saying yes or no to anything.
I think it's something worth considering.
Right.
Always the odd man out. On this one, I feel like I could move on and say, no, we can't afford it. This is a diversion. I think this is right along the lines of what you're talking about. We're going to waste resources on a subject that in the end, I don't see us being able to move on this within the time frame of our current budget projections.
All right. A study on optimizing elementary schools for minimizing combo classes and optimization of the use of space. I would be for studying that, very much for studying that.
Yes, I would too. Study facilities use, needs, the number of students residing in the school boundaries. I mean, I have that piece of paper. I think that's, I think it needs to be looked at, for sure.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes.
All right. Hey, look at that. Appoint a 7-Eleven committee to discuss the potential closure of one or more elementary schools. I think it's our responsibility to keep our eye on the resources that we have and how they're being used. So I would favor a committee looking at that.
I would too. Again, knowing the facility information.
Right.
Yeah, in conjunction with that study, absolutely, yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Now we're on a roll. And everything else is understood. I'm kidding about that. Appointing a 7-Eleven committee to review the work of the March 2011 committee regarding the district office Chaparral property. I would oppose that. I think the study was done, the facts are out. I don't think we would get any more facts from another committee studying the same thing. I think it's really more about the commercials of who and what and when and how the board feels about it. I don't think the facts would change.
I agree. I'd oppose it.
I don't know. Again, because it's hard to consider any of these things in a vacuum. And so, looking at, having a 7-Eleven look at what to do with this piece of property without considering what we're doing with the rest of the district, which is my understanding of how it was last time, it seems to be a bit of a limited inquiry. I don't necessarily know, and I don't know if this is even doable. I don't know that it would need a complete redo, but it feels like at least an update or something. And then I do have a sensitivity to the argument that there was a lot of OUSD folks there and not a lot of community folks. And so because what we're talking about is a much broader approach than just the chaparral property. And I think that warrants another look.
Can we combine, can it be a 7-Eleven committee that looks at elementary schools and district office chaparral?
Could be anything. The 7-Eleven mandate applies to the release of district-owned property. So in other words, you must do that study and show that you, however well you did it, whoever was on the committee, that you studied that issue before you made a decision to close an elementary school, to sell property, to divest yourself, of property.
And this was an elementary school.
It was. It was an elementary school. That's true.
First, to answer the question, Hank, we currently are fairly fully utilizing this chaparral in this office, right?
I would say, Piani, I can't think of a spot in particular that's not being used.
Everything's used.
Where Josh is and where the preschool's full and we're full and
It's used to the
chaparral's full.
capacity of the existing buildings.
I would say all these buildings are full.
So from my perspective, my focus would be and is on being able to hit the ground running with an adequate justification and sort of a scientific basis for spending Measure J money. And so I would focus the 7-Eleven on whether we would ever consider and which elementary schools to close. It seems to me that it's highly unlikely that we would decide to close any of this in the near term and therefore not spend whatever Measure J money is being talked about, on roofs or whatever else we're going to do here at Chaparral. So for my money, again, focusing and utilizing people's time efficiently and with a focus, I would say I'm not interested in revisiting the 7-Eleven for this property, but would definitely, and I believe it's legally obligated, that we have a 7-Eleven to the extent we would consider closing any elementary schools.
Right, that's all true. But remember, the focus of that 7-Eleven committee as it related to District Office Chaparral, which then resulted in the fairly long sentence, 9 out of 10 people supported the sale or lease of all or part of the property. That was for that reason. In other words, we were in worse financial condition than we are now. It was the only access we had other than the state for funds. And so it focused on this property exactly along the lines of what you all talked about 20 minutes ago. Okay, and that is, did that group support the sale or lease? Obviously they did, all or part of the property. So it was for financial reasons. Okay, and so yeah, we'd have to close, we'd have to move everything. Everything we do here, we'd have to move.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is, I guess what I didn't say, which was part of my thinking, is that it seems across, I didn't take a poll, but it seems, I remember what Thane said. I know I'm not interested in selling this property, the one we're in, the developed part of this block. So given that it looks like there's probably not any real support for selling the buildings, these arguably historical buildings, this portable structure that is emblematic of 1970s construction.
It's California, 70s is historical.
But it doesn't seem like there's a lot of interest in that. There may be some interest in selling some of the undeveloped parts, but it seems to me unlikely that in the near term we decide to do something really drastic with this property. And it feels to me like the clock is running on us starting to spend Measure J money, and we don't want to be spending it on schools that may or may not still be used. So that's, to me, the priority.
Well, I'm trying to remember, and I'm tapping in my memory, but didn't we need to have the 7-Eleven committee say whether there was sale or lease? So in order to do, you all said lease all of the district property, there was 3 of you who favored it. You're going to need to tap in, if I can recall correctly, that study in order to do more work on it.
Right, well, okay, so
if you give up that study, then you can't do the second thing on the list, is what I recall, because that's the joint occupancy. I believe there was a caveat, so I'm hesitant to
if you want to do more work on this leasing, then I believe, that's what I'm trying to remember, I think we still, for that joint occupancy, needed that 7-Eleven committee to do that.
So I'm sorry, hypothetically, if an elementary school closes and we lease this property, you would need a new 7-Eleven committee to do that? Or you would use the old 7-Eleven to lease this property and a new 7-Eleven to close it?
This property?
This one,
This property
yeah.
or
That's what, if you're gonna lease, if you want.
This property is covered by the first 7.
By the first 7-Eleven committee, but if you guys disregard it and then you can't do this lease option.
If we reject
If you're rejecting it and saying no more.
Right. Well, that's why all four options were
I believe.
We agree with each other.
Okay.
I mean, whether, we may not agree on the ultimate conclusion, but the question asked of us
Well, you're
is,
saying don't study it again.
do we review the work
Well,
prior? And I'm saying no.
But yes, so what I'm saying
all
is
four of you
but
in some
Thane
form said
and Jane said they would oppose it. And so by you two oppose, because that's what I wrote, appoint a new 7-Clubby to, right? So.
Right, we would not want to oppose.
In other words, the old committee report is fine.
Fine, okay.
Whatever the board did with it. I mean, there are a lot of boards, not some of them.
I mean, we may want to look at it again, but the old one's fine.
Stands, okay.
So one more question, if a new 7-Eleven committee to discuss potential closure for elementary, does that eliminate the work of the
No,
first?
totally.
No, it's a different
Totally
purpose.
different. In fact, I think I mentioned to you that in the first meeting of that 7-Eleven committee, I put on the table the possibility of broadening the charge of the committee to include elementary schools, and almost unanimously, the committee members said no.
Right. And although this was a little muddy, I think it does a lot to help us focus on the future.
I love it. That is a Kevin Ruff batting around ideas. I love that.
Fantastic. All right. This we can't.
Best of both worlds.
We can't bat this. We have to vote. Well, we don't have to vote, but we're asked to vote on this CSBA delegate assembly representative.
2 of the 3.
For Ventura County.
2 of the 3.
Right.
Do we individually vote and see if we come to a consensus?
That's a way to do it.
We can do that.
Pick 2 and see if we get.
Let's see what happens if we do that.
I would vote for Christina and John being candidates.
Okay, I'm taking notes. Okay.
I'll stick with that.
Those were my picks as well.
I think you got that.
Okay. I would vote for John and Kelsey, but Christina and John win.
There you go.
So perfect.
I'm sure this will put them over the top.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
Hey, do you want to make the call?
To Kelsey?
Yeah. It's, let's wait a few hours and then
There
we'll
you
call
go.
them. All right. All right. Superintendent's report.
I will take my standard post 8:30 stance, and that is, my report was covered right before, where the heck was it? What was the number there, right before? Where did we put Danny? Where was Danny? 7 point something. Anyway, that was
Something.
you were my superintendent's report.
You're something.
And I told the board that I'll do it either late, which was not as good as when we did it, so congratulations again, and we got 3 more weeks. That's my report.
Fantastic, thank you.
Dana, I need an official motion for the.
For the 2? You're right.
So all those in favor of John and Christina,
Should we move first?
Yeah, we need a motion.
I'll move to make our election for these positions.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
And then, okay, you've already got it.
Those are 2.
We got it. So items for future agendas.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That's right. You got it.
Well, the protocols we talked about.
Yes, protocols are scheduled for April. They were tentatively on the docket for tonight, but aren't you glad that we'll have time to discuss those in the next few weeks and then have them on the agenda for April.
Oh, well, we'll have to come back, obviously, to the resolution that we postponed.
Yes.
Yeah. And we have a wellness report. Those are the ones I can think of right now.
And there are always more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, Hank, you're going to be driving this whole matrix of Measure J and facilities.
Well, the first thing, and you will have, unless I can't get it done, which I expect I can, you'll have a recommendation on how to move ahead on the space utilization study. That's the first step. Great. All right. First step.
All right, so that leads us to the consent calendar. Can we have a motion to approve?
I'll move, notwithstanding the damage to my political career, I will move to approve the consent calendar.
Do we have a second? It's not as dangerous. All right, all in favor?
I'll follow his courageous lead.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any
I'm gonna
opposed?
abstain.
You're going to abstain.
Because I have some, I just don't get some of it, so I'm
Okay,
still on it.
fair enough. So at this point, we will adjourn to a closed session. Just as a matter of information, after the closed session, we're going to reconvene in an open session for probably less than 5 minutes, and then we'll be done. But the closed session will probably take a little while. All right. So we will adjourn the meeting for the closed session. Let's take 5 minutes to get set up and then be ready to go. We can do it.
Are you going to help set